The story begins on a battlefield, where we see the estate of a noble family in ruins. Maids are being slaughtered in the yard, some even burned alive, falling one after another like flies. Even those who don't resist are mercilessly killed. Amidst the chaos, two swords clash as two men engage in a fierce fight. One man raises his sword and swings down, but the other blocks the strike, his eyes filled with fury. We are introduced to the Ragnar clan, a grand ducal family that guards the empire at the northernmost edge of the continent. The Ragnar clan has been able to maintain their position as the Great Northern Wall for over a millennium due to a unique trait they possess. It is said that they carry the blood of dragons. Every member of the Ragnar bloodline is born with exceptional magical abilities, physical endurance, and a natural talent for swordsmanship. Everyone, except for the man currently fighting. As the man is slashed across his chest and collapses, bleeding out, the robed figure before him says that, even in the end, the man never understood that there are things he simply cannot achieve, no matter how hard he tries. The man inquires about what he means, and the robed figure starts to remove his cloak, revealing his face. We learn that the fallen man's name is Theo, and the robed figure is called Rendon. Theo asks why Rendon is here. Rendon smirks and replies that watching Theo train tirelessly every day despite his lack of talent was a pitiful sight, especially when hard work alone would never get him anywhere. He laughs, mocking Theo, saying that the nickname Imbecile of Ragnar suits him perfectly. He adds that Theo should have hidden away, calling him a talentless fool. Theo, gritting his teeth, accuses Rendon of approaching him under the guise of becoming his sword instructor and teaching him useless sword techniques, only to betray him and sell out the Rose Palace to their enemies. Theo barely gets the words out before Rendon slices off his arm, leaving him screaming in agony. Rendon sighs, asking why Theo is blaming him. He grabs Theo by the head and tells him that this all happened because of him. Rendon forces Theo to look at the carnage, the burning Rose Palace, the slaughter of his household members, even his mother being dragged lifeless before him. Rendon coldly informs him that all of this happened because he is the imbecile of the Ragnar clan. In the Ragnar clan, where strength is everything, it's only natural for the weakest to suffer such a fate. Theo, devastated, calls out to Rendon as he grabs his blade with his remaining hand, screaming in a desperate charge. But before he can land a blow, another sword pierces his chest, sending him to the ground. The man who threw the blade tells Rendon to finish it already. Rendon apologizes, saying he was just reminiscing and is almost done. As Theo lies dying, he wonders if this is truly the end. He couldn't accomplish anything in life, and now he watches everything burn. He laments that perhaps, if he had possessed talent, things could have been different. With his final breath, he is consumed by the flames, and just as he dies, a status window appears before him, informing him that his trait Ragnar's talent has activated, returning him to the regression point. Theo opens his eyes, now staring at a wooden sword. It's Rendon, once again, offering to end the lesson for the day. Theo is shocked and confused, wondering what's happening. Rendon remarks that Theo seems distracted today. Theo, bewildered, believes he must be having flashbacks of his life since he just died. He can't believe he's seeing Rendon's face again in size, thinking that death is cruel even in its final moments. Suddenly, a status window appears before him again, with a tutorial quest instructing him to punch Rendon. Theo is confused, looking at the window and then at Rendon, wondering if he's hallucinating. He doesn't think Rendon can see the window. Rendon asks if something is wrong, and Theo, still confused, drops his sword, thinking that perhaps this is some sort of divine gift, a chance to vent his frustrations before he passes on. Deciding to go with it, he rears back and punches Rendon directly in the face. However, Rendon doesn't even flinch, and Theo is surprised at how weak his punch felt, commenting on how realistic the dream is. Frustrated, Theo swings his sword, knocking Rendon back. Rendon sighs, understanding Theo's frustration, remarking that with the awakening ceremony approaching, it must be difficult to see no progress despite all his hard work. Theo is startled to hear about the awakening ceremony but stays silent as Rendon lectures him on controlling his emotions. Rendon says that as a member of the Ragnar clan, Theo should rely on his sword, not his fists. With that, Rendon walks away, leaving Theo dumbfounded. The other trainees mock him, laughing at how the talentless Theo dared to strike his master. They question how someone so incompetent, even for an illegitimate child, could be a member of the Ragnar clan. Theo grasps a handful of sand from the ground, trying to make sense of his situation. The pain he feels is too vivid, too real. That's when it hits him, this isn't a flashback. Everything around him is real. A chill runs down his spine as he realizes that the awakening ceremony is still 10 years away, meaning he has returned to his 17-year-old self. He wonders how this could be possible. Once again, the status window appears, congratulating him for completing the tutorial quest and informing him that Ragnar's talent has activated. The window asks if he would like to receive his reward now. Hesitating for a moment, Theo raises his hand and selects yes. Immediately, he feels a strange sensation in his chest, as if he is being blessed with the talent of his ancestors. The window informs him that he has now received his reward, and all his stats will increase at an incredible rate. Theo, overwhelmed by the bright light from the activation of his reward, wonders what is happening. The window reveals that a new quest has started. The scene shifts to the Rose Palace, still standing in all its glory. A figure puts down a teacup, commenting on the situation. We see Rendon speaking to someone, mentioning that it's rare to see someone so talentless. Rendon, whose full name is Rendon Harvey, explains that this is why he is here, to be a true teacher. He vows to train Theo for the upcoming awakening ceremony, with only 5 months remaining. The woman he is speaking to is none other than Theo's mother, Cecilia, the lady of the Rose Palace. She hands Rendon a bag of money, requesting that he give Theo more attention. Rendon assures her that he will teach Theo day and night, though inwardly, he laughs, knowing that he has no intention of doing so. The story continues as Rendon muses over Theo's lack of talent. He scornfully remarks that both Theo and his mother are doomed to failure, calling her a concubine and implying that, like mother, like son, there is no future for their bloodline. Rendon sneers at the money he's received, thinking it's exceptional pay for betraying Theo. After all, he now holds the prestigious title of tutor to the Ragnar clan's direct line, and for feeding information about Theo and stunting his growth, someone has guaranteed Rendon's own future. In his eyes, Theo, the imbecile of Ragnar, is nothing more than a stepping stone to his own success. As Rendon contemplates his windfall, he suddenly notices Theo sprinting down the hallway, not even sparing him a glance. Annoyed, Rendon clicks his tongue and shouts after Theo, calling him a loser. But Theo is too focused, his heart racing with excitement as he rushes toward his mother. Bursting into her room, he throws his arms around her and calls out her name. Surprised, Cecilia asks if he's tired from his training but is taken aback by the sudden embrace. Theo, overwhelmed with emotion, begins to cry, realizing that he's truly back, 10 years in the past. Memories of his mother's lifeless body flood his mind, along with the heavy realization of his failure, being talentless in his previous life. But now, he's determined to change the future. Tears of joy stream down his face as he clings to his mother, resolved to grow stronger and change his fate. He explains to himself that though he's currently weak and without status, if the mysterious status window he encountered is real, he has a chance to grow. He vows to become powerful enough to hold his ground in the looming succession war and strong enough to exact revenge on Rendon. The next quest from the status window appears: train his body to the limit. He starts at 0%. That night, Theo is seen running furiously through the training grounds, determined to get stronger. He burns with the desire to defeat Rendon, but he knows that with his current weak body, that goal is far off. He recalls his previous life and the intelligence agency he had worked with, Black Word. Though he was part of the information team due to his lack of combat ability, now the information he gathered will serve him well. He recalls a potion from his past, the Bloody Sword Emperor's Elixir, and its secret manual, understanding its potential to greatly enhance his body. All the extreme training he had given up on before is now achievable, thanks to the activation of Ragnar's talent. As he continues to run, the other trainees notice and comment, surprised by his sudden stamina. Theo, pushing harder than ever before, is now 65% of the way to completing his goal. Days pass, and Theo shows no sign of slowing down, training tirelessly day and night. Evelyn, the manager of the training ground, watches him with curiosity. She yawns, wondering how Theo ever earned the nickname Imbecile of Ragnar when he's clearly showing immense drive and stamina. After days of ceaseless training, Theo is now at 97%, his eyes burning with determination, but his body nearing its limit. We flash back to the previous night, when Theo had rested at 90% progress, only to find that the percentage had decreased. This meant he couldn't afford to rest, he had to push himself to the absolute limit. With this realization, Theo trained relentlessly for 2 straight days without a single break. With each swing of his sword and each lap around the training ground, he gritted his teeth and pushed himself further, determined not to stop until the task was complete. At last, as he teeters on the brink of collapse, the percentage ticks from 99% to 100%. Theo feels an overwhelming sense of relief as the status window appears, congratulating him for completing the second tutorial quest. As a reward, he has been granted a dragon's heart, and for completing the quest so quickly, he receives an additional bonus 10 years worth of magical power from his past life. Completely exhausted, Theo falls to the ground, barely able to move. The status window asks if he would like to receive his rewards now. With trembling hands, Theo clicks yes. The rewards flood into him, a brilliant blue aura emanating from his body as he lies on the floor. Evelyn, who is still watching from a distance, is stunned by the sight, feeling the shockwaves of energy radiating from Theo. After some time, Theo wakes up in a bed, disoriented. He looks around, wondering where he is, when Evelyn walks in, telling him not to worry. She explains that he is in the break room of training ground number 4. Even a Ragnar, she notes, would collapse if they pushed themselves as hard as Theo had. She reintroduces herself, noting that he lost consciousness while training alone that morning, so she moved him here to rest. Theo, still tired but grateful, thanks her. However, Evelyn's curiosity hasn't faded. She offers him a drink and then drops a bombshell. She asks if he knows that within the Ragnar clan, opening one's mana hall before the awakening ceremony is strictly forbidden. Theo calmly acknowledges this and drinks, but Evelyn presses further, reminding him of the consequences for breaking this rule. She then asks him directly if he knows what happens when someone opens their mana hall prematurely. Theo is startled, unsure of where she's going with this, and asks why she's asking. Evelyn then reveals that just before he lost consciousness, a mana wave had occurred that was consistent with the opening of a mana hall. Theo's eyes widen in surprise. Her tone sharpens as she demands to know if he really opened it. Theo nervously tries to play it off, insisting that if he had opened his mana hall, he wouldn't still be alive. But he begins to sweat, recalling the dragon's heart he received as a reward. He realizes that the dragon's heart is actually where a mana hall can be placed, and having it there would make the mana flow through him far more efficiently than normal. Normally, warriors like those in the Ragnar clan long for a dragon's heart because it could bring overwhelming power. However, no human has ever been able to overcome the limitations of using one until now. Theo inwardly marvels at the incredible power he's been given by the quest rewards, but also realizes that it's placed him in an awkward situation with Evelyn. She is a high-ranking swordswoman who retired after losing her left arm. Though she now manages the training grounds, she once commanded the white-armored dragon cavalry, and was so skilled that even the demon dragon of the cavalry admired her. She was known for her fierce principles, the type of person who didn't judge based on status or strength. Dishonesty or cowardice didn't matter to her. Theo reflects on what to say to her, remembering how, when he was being rigid in the past, she had stripped him of his position as his direct superior. If she discovers his mana hall, she will execute him right here and now. He sweats nervously but asks himself if she can really go through with it, wondering what would happen if he isn't caught. Thinking about how well he knows her, he realizes he can use her strict personality against her. He tells her he is also an heir of Ragnar, and if anyone finds out she is spreading false rumors, it would be seen as defiling the family name. She acknowledges this, agreeing that's true by the rules. He then asks her if she knows what the punishment is for humiliating a Ragnar heir. She answers that it is execution, and he says it's good she understands. He tells her to go ahead and check. She's puzzled, wondering if he's always been this bold, but insists that what she sensed was definitely a mana wave. She begins to manifest mana in her hand, telling him to excuse her while she checks. Even if he is of Ragnar bloodline, she tells him, rules are rules and there are no exceptions. She analyzes his abdomen for a mana hall, but finds nothing, which leaves her baffled. She mutters in disbelief, saying there isn't a mana hall. Theo calmly asks her if she felt it or not. Immediately, Evelyn drops to her knees, begging him to execute her for her mistake, offering her life to atone for her sin. Smiling, Theo thinks to himself that, of course, there wouldn't be a mana hall because he possesses a dragon heart, something far beyond ordinary mana halls. Having a mana hall means being able to control one's mana freely, so with the dragon heart, Theo can conceal his mana at will. The fact that humans could possess dragon hearts wouldn't be known for years, so Evelyn would have never suspected such a thing. Patting her on the shoulder, Theo reassures her that there's no need for her to worry. He admires how principled she is, saying that there aren't many people willing to risk their life to enforce the truth, even against an heir. He realizes that having someone as strong as Evelyn indebted to him would be advantageous. The reason the opening of mana halls is forbidden before the awakening ceremony is to prevent overflow, so for her to be concerned about even him, the bastard of Ragnar, makes him happy in a way. He thanks her for taking care of him after he passed out and leaves, leaving Evelyn stunned and wondering what just happened. Theo reflects that, with the dragon heart and the magic power from his past life, he'll become absurdly powerful very soon. A few days later, Rendon is shouting again, telling Theo to swing more to the right. He yells at Theo, frustrated, wondering how many times he has to explain such a simple thing. Theo, on the other hand, doesn't care, pretending to be weak while steadily growing stronger. But it's starting to grate on his nerves. He glares at Rendon, knowing that his instructor is deliberately teaching him poor sword techniques to make him look foolish. Theo becomes more certain that there's a mastermind behind Rendon's actions, possibly the same person responsible for his death in his previous life. He needs to figure out who that is. Suddenly, Theo comes up with a plan and calls out to Rendon. The instructor barks at him, reminding him that he can't talk during lessons. But Theo dismisses this, saying he can't listen to such trash anymore, snapping his training sword in half and demanding to know how someone with such third-rate skills could have become a mid-rank swordsman. He accuses Rendon of being commissioned to monitor him, and that he would likely struggle against even low-ranked demonic beasts. Rendon, infuriated, asks Theo to repeat himself. Theo walks forward, mocking him, saying his skills are trash and that he'll force him to resign as his instructor. Rendon, growing even angrier, realizes that if things go wrong for him, he'll have to contact the mastermind. The scene shifts to a place called the Chameleon Palace, where a man bursts into a room, calling out to someone named Axion, asking if he's heard that the bastard of Ragnar is going to duel his master next week. Axion sits, drink in hand, as the man continues talking, suggesting that Theo might be left half-crippled after the duel. Without warning, Axion throws his glass, headshotting the man with pinpoint accuracy and knocking him out. Axion, known as the Dark Tiger of the Four Hounds of the North, tells him that it doesn't matter if some bastard becomes crippled. Beside him is Remington Narrow, the Silver Lion of the same group, though he remains silent. Another man enters the room, saying it should matter because if they let their guard down, things could go wrong. This man is Ed Troyvon, one of the 9 dragons and also known as the Sky Dragon. Axion dismisses his uncle's concerns, arguing that they only need to worry about people with talent. Ed warns that even the smallest spark can ignite a blaze with Ragnar, but Axion is unfazed, confident that their instructor will handle the situation. 1 week later, back at the training grounds, the duel between Theo and Rendon is about to begin. Trainees are laughing and chatting, with some skeptical about Theo's abilities. Evelyn, on the other hand, looks worried. Theo raises his blade, thinking to himself that things have escalated far beyond his original plan. He only intended to humiliate Rendon and get him fired, but now the duel has drawn a large crowd. The cheers echo around him, but he calms himself, determined to get his revenge on Rendon. He doesn't care about any of that. If his employer says he's fired, then that's that. Given his past life, Theo feels an intense urge to beat him to death right there and then, but he knows he's not confident in his skills yet. First, he decides to distance himself from Rendon and gather more information about him. Rendon quickly realizes this is bad news. If Theo gets fired like this, his mission will end in failure. Desperate, he pleads with Theo, telling him that this goes against the rules and that he might end up facing the tribunal. Just then, the status window appears before Theo, informing him of the tutorial quest. Evelyn, thinking quickly, says she has an idea. They should resolve this the Ragnar way. She smiles knowingly. Theo asks if she means by the rule of the strong, and she nods, saying exactly that. They should settle this with a sword match, and there would be no need for Rendon to go to the tribunal. The victors shall be final. Rendon laughs, thinking it's a fantastic idea, fully believing this is going to work in his favor. Evelyn suggests that the match take place a week from now. Theo, taken aback, hesitates, but Evelyn laughs and asks if that timeline is alright with him. Theo responds confidently, though internally he knows it's far from ideal. He cannot beat Rendon yet. The scene shifts to 1 week later. The trainees, buzzing with gossip, mention that from what they've heard, Theo can barely swing his sword properly. One trainee scoffs, saying that's hard to believe. After all, Theo is still a Ragnar. His friend jokes, saying that if Theo were a regular Ragnar, he wouldn't even comment, but since he's the heir to Ragnar's bloodline, there's no way he'll lose to a mid-rank swordsman like Rendon. As the two prepare for the duel, Rendon offers Theo one last chance. If you apologize now, I'll act like none of this ever happened. There's no need to risk your life over something as trivial as pride, he says. Theo smirks and replies, that's exactly what you should be saying. If you don't want to end up a one-armed swordsman, it'd be best for you to accept that you've been fired. Rendon's expression darkens. Furious, he snarls, you're really going to keep this act up to the very end? I was going to let this slide because you're so pitiful, but now I see that won't do. I'll kill you and just call it an accident. The outcome of this match is already decided, so there's no issue here. The duel begins with Rendon offering Theo the first strike, confident that the result is already decided. Theo charges in, their swords clashing. The trainees are instantly captivated, though it's clear Rendon is pushing Theo back. It looks like Theo barely knows how to use his sword, and at this rate, he might die. All he can do for now is block Rendon's relentless attacks. Rendon chuckled mockingly, asking Theo what had happened to all his confidence. He sneered, saying that Theo couldn't do anything against him, yet had dared to look down on him. This outcome was obvious, he added. Theo wasn't even a low-ranked swordsman, merely an apprentice. While his skills had recently shown some strange improvement, it wasn't nearly enough. If Theo were at least at the level of one of the 4 Hounds of the North, that would be a different story, but there was no way that imbecile of Ragnar could defeat him. We flash back to Theo confronting Evelyn about her suggestion of the duel. What were you thinking? Theo had asked, but Evelyn simply responded that it was an act of goodwill. If Theo wanted to cut Rendon off completely, he needed to be thorough, she explained, since it seemed like Rendon had someone backing him. Firing him wouldn't be enough. Surprised, Theo asked how she knew this, and Evelyn replied that once she saw Rendon teaching Theo a weird sword style, she had someone investigate him. After all, the way he was teaching looked awkward and excessive, so she wondered where such a lousy instructor had come from. Theo reflected on how Evelyn hadn't caught on to this in his past life, but now, due to the incident with his mana haul, he must have piqued her interest. Evelyn set her tea down, revealing that every trace of Rendon led back to a single place, the Camellia Palace. Theo, shocked, asked if this was all because of their miserable war for the throne, anger swelling inside him. He quickly calmed down, surprised by how much Evelyn had discovered. Still, he pointed out that with his current skill level, he couldn't defeat Rendon. What's your plan now? He asked. Evelyn smiled, assuring him that he was underestimating his potential. Back in the present, Rendon, now desperate, charged forward, swinging his sword recklessly at Theo. If you kneel now, I might just forgive you, he taunted, swinging his sword down heavily. Theo blocked it effortlessly, not even straining. Rendon, puzzled, started to realize something was wrong. How was Theo blocking all his attacks so easily? This wasn't the Theo he knew. Growing more frantic, Rendon continued his assault, but to no avail. From the sidelines, Remington watched with the other trainees, shocked. He's not being pushed back, he's actually holding his ground, one whispered in disbelief. Evelyn, as expected, stood smiling. She had told Theo that 1 week of her personal training would be more than enough to surpass someone like Rendon. He was merely a pathetic excuse for a teacher, after all. Theo grinned, realizing how well things had turned out. Having Evelyn indebted to him had been more than worth it. However, there was one thing nagging at him, and he had asked her during their conversation why she was helping him so much. Evelyn had responded that while part of it was indeed because of what had happened before, she also knew someone who was obsessed with gathering talented individuals. Meanwhile, Rendon was panicking. Theo shouldn't have any talent, is he acting this whole time, he wondered. His mind raced as Theo suddenly asked, who's backing you? Caught off guard, Rendon stammered, what are you talking about? Theo, unimpressed, continued, did you really think I wouldn't notice? You've been giving me those worthless lessons on purpose. Show me a palace, perhaps? The moment Theo mentioned the palace, a chill ran down Rendon's spine. How did he know? Theo smiled, pleased with the response, and said, so you are being honest. Tell me, do you know what it feels like to have your arm chopped off? In an instant, Theo dashed forward, swinging his blade toward Rendon's arm. Before Rendon could react, his arm was severed, just as Theo had lost his in his past life. Rendon, horrified, watched his arm fly through the air, growing more distant with each passing second. He looked up at Theo in disbelief. Remington, too, was taken aback by the sudden turn of events, while Rendon collapsed, screaming in agony. Theo stared down at him, eyes cold and resolute. I've definitely gotten stronger, Theo thought. And there's still so much room to grow. He then reminded Rendon of the last words he'd heard before his death in his previous life, it's your fault this has happened. Rendon, now in utter panic, pleaded, what are you talking about? But Theo simply readied his blade. It's your fault you're dying here today, Theo declared. Of all the Ragnars who believe in the rule of the strong, you are the weakest. These were the exact same words Rendon had spoken before killing Theo in his past life. Desperation filled Rendon's voice as he cried out, wait. But it was too late. With one swift strike, Theo decapitated him. Rendon's final sight was his own body, now separated from his head. With that, Theo completed his third tutorial quest. The trainees looked on, dumbfounded, unable to believe that Theo, an apprentice swordsman, had defeated a mid-tier opponent like Rendon. They murmured amongst themselves, how did he do that? Theo, however, simply looked down at Rendon's corpse with disdain. So weak, he muttered, disgusted that he had suffered at this man's hands in his previous life. But now, things were different. The system window popped up, notifying him that, in addition to completing the quest, he had earned an extra reward, a new ability called Observation. Theo also regained a year's worth of magic power. Confused yet intrigued, Theo wondered what Observation was. Suddenly, a figure descended from the sky, landing directly behind Theo with an explosion of aura that shattered the ground. Theo turned to see none other than Julius Ragnar, the demon dragon and commander of the white-armored dragon cavalry. Julius's overwhelming aura filled the air. How long has he been watching? Theo wondered, his heart pounding. Even Evelyn, usually calm, was annoyed by her former superior's dramatic entrance. Does he really have to destroy the floor every time? She muttered to herself. Julius approached, eyes glowing red. Theo braced himself for the worst, but Julius suddenly burst into laughter, slapping Theo on the back. That was exciting, Julius boomed. He praised Theo for his talent, even adding that he had surpassed his master. While Theo was still processing everything, Julius put his hand on his shoulder. Join the white-armored dragon cavalry, he said, leaving Theo completely stunned. Evelyn, on the other hand, had seen this coming. The trainees couldn't believe it either. There's no way, the imbecile of Ragnar got scouted by the white-armored dragon cavalry, they whispered in disbelief. No matter how well he fought, that's just not possible. Remington then speaks up, addressing one of the trainees. He asks if there's ever been a case where an apprentice swordsman, who hasn't even gone through the awakening ceremony, has been scouted. The trainee responds that he hasn't heard of such a case. Remington confirms, saying it's because it's impossible to accurately measure someone's potential while their mana hall is still sealed. Even if their swordsmanship is exceptional, their magical ability might be lacking. He admits that no matter how incredible Julius's intuition is, even he can't be completely certain. But for some reason, it seems Julius sees something in Theo that they don't. Remington wonders what kind of potential Julius saw in Theo and even muses if the commander might take an interest in him as well. Theo, however, firmly declines the offer, his expression stern. Julius is stunned, speechless, as is Remington. Evelyn drops her cigarette in disbelief. The entire arena is met with dead silence. Later on, rumors begin circulating among the trainees. Some speculate that Theo refused Julius's offer because he thought his own skills weren't yet worthy. After all, it's not every day one sees a humble Ragnar. The gossip spreads quickly. At Chamia Palace, a woman remarks on how complicated things have gotten, expressing disbelief that Rendon was killed. This woman is revealed to be Emil Ragnar, the lady of Chamia Palace. Ed, her brother, reassures her, reminding her that they didn't assign Rendon because of his exceptional skills. Emil brushes off Rendon's death, stating it's of little concern to them. She explains that Julius, the demon dragon, personally reached out to Theo, and what's more, it seems Evelyn was behind it. This means they can't interfere by assigning Theo a new master. If Theo starts gaining too much attention, it will only become harder for them to gain control over the Rose Palace. Asks Emil why she's so concerned about Theo standing out, suggesting that the clan head won't take much interest in him anyway, so their plans should proceed as normal. Emil reminds him that their best shot at taking control of the Rose Palace without offending the clan leader is to keep Theo weak and powerless. Axion agrees, saying that Theo is still powerless. He questions how much someone like Theo could have changed. Evelyn and Julius, after all, have always had a soft spot for underdogs. Ed, however, isn't convinced, warning Axion that they should have told Rendon to be more careful. Axion dismisses his concerns, saying their mother and uncle worry too much, and confidently announces he'll pay Theo a visit himself to remind him of his place. Back at the training grounds, Evelyn compliments Theo on his performance. He thanks her, acknowledging that training under a true master has made all the difference. She teases him, saying it would have been even better if he had joined the white-armored dragon cavalry, and asks why he turned it down. Theo admits that a small part of him regrets it since joining Julius's cavalry had been a dream of his in his previous life. But he believes that joining now would be premature and that there's no need to limit himself so early. He points out that the privileges awarded to the top performer at the awakening ceremony are far greater than simply joining the cavalry. He confides that he doesn't want any special treatment and is content training under her until the ceremony. Evelyn, satisfied with his response, tells him Julius won't be disappointed either. Theo then activates his newly acquired skill, observation, to analyze Evelyn. He discovers her age, title, rank, and even her admiration for his humility and character. Theo muses that this skill will be incredibly useful, and he's confident he'll be able to leverage it to his advantage. While scanning her status, he notices something unusual. Her profile mentions that she misses the white-armored dragon cavalry. He's intrigued by this revelation. Suddenly, a man approaches and introduces himself as Sybil from the Southern Inspection Post. He informs Theo that he has something important to discuss with him. Theo, finding him a bit intimidating, uses observation on Sybil and is startled by the results. Sybil's title is revealed as the Dunce of the Southern Inspection Post, and his demeanor is described as full of enthusiasm and excitement. He longs to cross swords with Theo, though this sentiment comes across as unsettling to Theo, who starts to feel creeped out. The last tutorial quest has begun, and it's titled Discard the Imbecile of Ragnar. Sybil pleads with Theo, admitting that in the past, he ignored him, fully believing that the title of Ragnar's imbecile was appropriate. Theo debates whether to kill him on the spot, but Sybil goes on to explain that he's been observing Theo's efforts. He notes that Theo trains harder than anyone else, day in and day out. He then confesses that after seeing Theo's performance against Rendon, and the fact that Julius himself invited him, Theo has now become his idol. He shares that he was once on the verge of giving up after being labeled the idiot of the Southern Inspection Post, but Theo inspired him to keep going. He begs for the chance to spar with Theo. Theo, initially skeptical of Sybil's intentions, uses observation to verify his sincerity. He's surprised to find that Sybil's admiration is genuine. Reflecting on how people react to him, Theo realizes that after defeating Rendon and gaining Julius's attention, he expected people driven by jealousy to come and challenge him. Instead, he's finding that there are those who genuinely want to follow him. He concludes that perhaps the Ragnar family members still have some pride left after all. Realizing that he'll need loyal allies if he's to rise to the position of clan head, Theo sees this as an opportunity. This quest, which is the final part of the tutorial, gives him a chance to shed the unwanted title of Ragnar's imbecile, something he was never able to escape in his previous life. He asks Evelyn for a moment to spar with Sybil, and she agrees, encouraging him to showcase his skills. Theo and Sybil take their positions, each formally introducing themselves and their masters. Evelyn smiles upon hearing Theo proudly name her as his master. Sybil, too, introduces himself, revealing that he wields the swordsmanship of the core clan and specializes in the quick sword. He expresses his excitement for the fight. Sybil charges in with a flurry of swift attacks, which Theo effortlessly blocks. Sybil, impressed, comments on how fast Theo is, despite his reputation. He adds that even though he was called the fool of the Southern Inspection Post, he takes great pride in his speed. But as expected, Theo's skills are the real deal, as he easily fends off every strike. Theo reflects that if this had been his previous life, he would have struggled against even a few of these hits. But now, things are different. With a single, decisive swing, Theo sends Sybil flying across the training grounds, crashing into the wall with such force that Sybil vomits a little. Sybil, still in awe, thanks Theo for the fight, saying he learned a lot. Theo then catches his reflection in his sword and wonders if he can use observation on himself. To his surprise, it works. He sees his own title, his talents, and a few locked abilities that Red Access denied. He's also surprised to see that he's still at level 1, and there are sections of his profile that are hidden. Having finally accessed his stats for the first time, they will now be notated with numbers. He notices that his magic power is high, likely due to inheriting his past life's magic in his dragon heart. But oddly, his luck is in the negatives. Bro is cursed. Theo speculates that the bad luck he experienced in his previous life may have been due to this and decides he'll need to figure out a way to improve his luck in the future. While lost in thought, Theo suddenly realizes he's completely surrounded by the other trainees. He wonders what's going on. Evelyn explains that no matter how weak Rendon was, he was still a mid-rank swordsman, and now that Theo has defeated him and earned the approval of the commander, the Ragnar family, being focused on strength, has two ways of reacting. They either become envious or begin to admire him. The ones gathered around clearly fall into the latter category. The trainees murmur amongst themselves, admitting that if they were in Sybil's place, they don't know if they could have even blocked Theo's strikes. A battle-hungry energy begins to fill the air as they express their desire to spar with him as well. Theo, feeling a bit overwhelmed, sighs and calls forward one of the men he recognized, named Eody, surprising the man that Theo knew his name. Theo calls Eody forward, saying he looks forward to sparring with him. Eody, feeling honored, introduces himself as the third son of Viscount Naylan and a practitioner of the double ascension swordsmanship. Theo, as he did with Sybil, introduces himself formally, expressing his hope for a good fight. They charge at each other, clashing swords several times. Theo's basic swordsmanship proficiency increases during the duel. As Eody prepares for a powerful strike, aiming for Theo's neck, Theo calmly raises his sword and deflects the blow, disarming Eody in the process. His proficiency increases once again. Eody, in shock, admits his defeat, stating that it's clearly his loss. With this, Theo gains Eody's approval, which results in his luck stat increasing by 1. Theo realizes that his luck seems to be tied to his growing reputation. He also gains experience points, strengthening his resolve to continue challenging others. His goal is simple now: he needs to fight as many people as possible. Soon, he gains the approval of several others, including Bonnet Ramiro, Eric, Manfred, and Manuel. Though there are too many names to mention individually, each duel raises his luck further. After fighting continuously, Theo becomes visibly tired, but he remains eager. Looking at his quest progress, he notices that despite the many fights, his completion percentage has only increased by 1. He speculates that perhaps all of his opponents already respected him, and to make greater progress, he needs to face stronger foes or situations where many doubt him. Suddenly, Remington approaches and remarks that Theo looks exhausted, asking if he'll be alright. Theo responds that he'll rest when necessary, but not yet. To his surprise, Remington steps forward and requests a spar with him, revealing his identity as the Silver Lion. Theo is astonished, recognizing the man, and so does the crowd. Remington is one of the famed Four Hounds of the North, a title reserved for the strongest of the Ragnar clan's awakening generation. Remington formally introduces himself, saying he's come to test the swordsmanship of his fellow Ragnar before the awakening ceremony. He expresses gratitude for this opportunity and reveals his talents: sword genius, keen senses, and extreme hard worker. His status shows that he sees Theo as an unexpected rival. Theo, awestruck, introduces himself once more, this time mentioning that he is the 31st son of the great guardian of the North, Ragnar. He humbly states it's an honor to duel someone as respected as Remington. They begin their duel, their swords colliding and sending sparks flying. Theo's quest progress increases by one as the battle intensifies. Their swords grind against each other, and then suddenly, pieces of Theo's sword shatter, flying through the air. Remington stands confidently, having broken Theo's blade. The crowd is stunned, while Evelyn watches with a knowing expression. The trainees are in disbelief, and Sybil struggles to accept the result. Despite breaking Theo's sword, Remington unexpectedly admits defeat, saying it's his loss. The trainees are confused, but Remington explains that Theo's sword was already worn out, and on top of that, he was clearly exhausted from previous fights. Theo, however, responds that in a real battle, no one would offer such considerations. As soon as his blade broke, he had already lost. Remington smiles, and they shake hands, acknowledging each other's strength. This moment earns Theo a 5% increase in his quest completion, and even Evelyn seems pleased with the outcome. Theo reflects on the duel, realizing just how strong Remington is. While he's grown stronger through acquiring talents and secret techniques, he still has a long way to go compared to the other elites of his generation. Despite the duel being cut short, he gains a lot from it, including a significant increase in his luck and reputation. Remington then reveals that he didn't come just for a duel. He formally invites Theo to join the Scaled Dragon Society, an exclusive group that only those selected can join. Sybil, overhearing, is astonished and explains that the society is prestigious. Theo is curious about Remington's true motives but sees this as an opportunity. The society, led by Action, is filled with individuals who look down on him. It's the perfect environment for Theo to progress his quest and gather intelligence on Action. Without hesitation, Theo accepts the invitation, thinking it will also provide useful reconnaissance at the Camellia Palace. Later, at the Rose Palace, Cecilia bursts into Theo's room, overjoyed by the news of his invitation to the Scaled Dragon Society. She informs him that, since Action and other influential figures will be present, everything about him, from his attire to his behavior, will be scrutinized. She takes his measurements, preparing him for the event, reminding him that as a former actress, she can help him make a strong impression. Theo reflects on his past life, remembering how his mother had always carried guilt for him being labeled as the child of a concubine. The cold and harsh Ragnar clan had been unforgiving to them both. He realizes how difficult it must have been for her, having a son who never quite met expectations. His mother, resting her head on his chest, assures him she believes in him. She knows he can succeed, and he smiles, comforted by her unwavering faith. Hugging her tightly, Theo vows that every step he takes forward will be for both of them. He's determined now more than ever he's going to crush the Scaled Dragon Society. The scene jumps to the night of the banquet for the Scaled Dragon Society. Remington is standing outside a carriage, waiting, when he's surprised by the sight of Theo slowly approaching. Theo is decked out in sharp attire, and he gives Remington a confident smile. Remington, astonished, asks if it's really Theo, remarking that he looks like an entirely different person. They both chuckle, and Remington gestures for Theo to head inside. Theo admits that Remington has a point. Not only has he grown taller, but his body is also more developed after 2 weeks of intense training. During that time, Remington visited him daily, and they've grown close. Theo has also amassed quite a few followers, though he notes that most of them look like the same guy with slightly different haircuts. Evelyn, observing the situation, sighs and mutters that she only intended to train Theo for a short while, but it has turned into a much bigger ordeal than she expected. Theo reflects on the past 2 weeks and sighs, admitting it was exhausting. As they approach the venue, Remington comments that he heard this is Theo's first formal banquet, and Theo confirms it. Remington reassures him, telling him not to be nervous, he'll do well. But there's one thing Theo should know. Curious, Theo asks what it is. Remington explains that his friend, Action, can be quite mischievous, and it was actually Action who extended the invitation, wanting to meet Theo personally. Remington hopes Theo won't judge him too harshly, as Action is the one who organized the banquet. Theo realizes that it wasn't Remington who invited him but Action instead. He muses that things are going almost too smoothly and tells Remington that he's looking forward to it. At least now he knows that when he arrives, he'll likely face some hostility, which works to his advantage. Meanwhile, Action, who is already at the banquet, thinks about the imbecile of Ragnar coming to meet him, excited to have a new toy to play with. As the carriage pulls into town and comes to a stop, Remington informs Theo that they've arrived. Stepping out of the carriage, Theo immediately spots the Camellia Palace, a place deeply tied to the trauma of his past life, as they were the ones who interfered with his growth and ultimately consumed him, his mother, and the entirety of the Rose Palace. Remington asks if Theo is ready to enter, and Theo replies that he is. Remington then shares the news that Action will personally come out to greet him, and they should find him near the entrance. As they approach, Theo begins tuning out Remington's words, realizing that Action is likely trying to put him in his place. But he didn't come here without a plan. Action will soon realize that Theo is no longer the same as before. Theo's attention shifts when he notices a blue light shining from one of the windows, the same light that signals a quest, making him wonder if a new quest awaits inside the palace. While Theo is distracted, something suddenly explodes near him, releasing a white powder into the air. Remington shouts Theo's name and rushes to him, but Theo reassures him that he's fine. Remington yells at the culprits, demanding to know what they were thinking. Theo, on the other hand, muses that in his past life, he wouldn't have been able to dodge that. He initially suspected that Remington was in on the prank, but now he realizes that Remington is genuinely confused. The ones who threw the powder laugh from a window, saying it was just a friendly greeting and a basic courtesy. Remington, furious, asks them what they mean by greeting. Action steps in, telling Remington not to be angry, it was just a greeting between brothers. Action's behavior reveals that he has a talent for manipulation, and Theo mentally prepares himself for the challenges ahead. Looking at Action, Theo pauses for a moment, then smiles, thanking him. His response catches Action off guard. Theo adds that with such a warm welcome, he can only be grateful, and he's looking forward to the party. This subtle shift annoys Action, though he quickly masks it with laughter, remarking that Theo has become quite entertaining since he last saw him. Inside the palace, people are already socializing, though most are murmuring about why Action would even invite Theo in the first place. Although Theo is from a direct line, his reputation as the imbecile of Ragnar leaves many questioning the decision. Remington apologizes to Theo, saying the group usually doesn't behave this way. Theo brushes it off, saying he's actually more than grateful. Remington, puzzled, wonders why Theo is so nonchalant about the situation. In reality, Theo is pleased. The more they underestimate him, the easier it will be to crush them later. His attention drifts back to the blue light upstairs, confirming that it must be related to his quest, but he doesn't yet have a natural way to approach it. As Theo sips his drink, deep in thought, Action begins descending the stairs, asking how Theo is enjoying the party. Theo briefly feels a surge of anxiety but quickly calms himself, smiling and thanking Action for the invitation. Action, with a sly smile, apologizes for the earlier incident, admitting it might have been too much. He steps in close, his tone turning menacing, and asks Theo if he agrees. Remington, sensing the tension, grows concerned, but Theo surprises everyone by asking why Action would apologize. He plays it off casually, saying he only remembers it as a friendly greeting that even caught him off guard. Theo then slaps Action's back playfully, laughing and complimenting his mischievous side, claiming he never knew Action was so fun. Theo continues, saying he's changed a lot and that he likes this new side of him. The others, watching from a distance, laugh quietly, assuming Theo is only playing along because he knows he's inferior to Action. They comment that as an illegitimate child, Theo has no real standing and cannot possibly challenge the noble bloodline of thron. Even though both he and Action are Ragnar's sons, they are on entirely different levels. As the banquet continues, someone remarks that there's no way to compare thron, the prestigious swordsmanship clan from the east, with some random woman from who knows where. Tries his best to stay calm, especially after hearing the insult aimed at his mother. Soon after, they start taking jabs at Remington, asking why he's wasting his time with that imbecile, but then they add that it makes sense. Remington, after all, is also an illegitimate child. Remington begins to grow visibly irritated. The atmosphere shifts as the other party members realize they've touched on a forbidden subject. Remington is clearly struggling to hold back his anger. Theo, seeing this, decides he's done watching and calls out to Action. With a smirk, he tells Action he should greet his new friends as well. He grabs Action's hand, pulling it off his shoulder, and strides toward the ones who were insulting Remington. He picks up a wine bottle and raises it towards one of their glasses. The man, clueless, asks if he said something wrong. Without warning, Theo smashes the bottle directly into the man's face. Action and Remington are both stunned as the man collapses to the floor, screaming in agony, blood pouring from his head. The man, still in shock, looks up at Theo and curses, calling him a bastard. Theo responds without hesitation, landing a fierce kick that sends the man flying to the other side of the room. He mocks him, asking who he thinks he is to insult him, and sarcastically adds that it was just a little greeting, nothing more. His viciousness starts to change how many in the room view him, and the progress on his quest suddenly jumps from 41% to 43%. Remington, still shocked, realizes that this isn't the Theo he's used to. He wonders if Theo's aggressive actions were because of him. Theo, standing over the man, says that he believes he's given a warm enough greeting and places his foot on the man's arm. He smiles cruelly, asking if he was wrong. The man screams, begging him to stop, but Theo, showing no mercy, snaps the man's arm with a swift motion, shattering the bone completely. Panic ripples through the crowd as they realize they've greatly underestimated Theo's brutality. His quest progress jumps to 58%, and when the man loses consciousness from the pain, it ticks up another percentage point. Theo, now satisfied, releases the man's arm and glances around the room, asking if anyone else would like to say hello. His progress skyrockets to 66%. Suddenly, 4 men leap down from the upper floor, surrounding Theo in an instant. Each one unsheathes their blade in unison, pointing their weapons directly at his throat. One of them declares that Theo has committed the grave sin of harming the young master, and such a crime will be repaid with death. Theo, unfazed, laughs and remarks that this is exactly how it should be. He asks who the young master is, and the guards respond that he is the third young master of the Hanabi clan. His name is Ian. Theo smirks, realizing this is what he expected. He came here knowing the place was filled with enemies. He recognizes the Hanabi clan as one of the 6 snow clans that serve Ragnar, and he anticipated that they wouldn't sit quietly while the imbecile they've long mocked suddenly started causing trouble. Theo then shrugs, asking, "So what?" His question unsettles the guards, but Theo is done letting others walk over him. He questions whether the dogs of one of Ragnar's bannerman clans dare to demand his death and asks if they can truly take responsibility for their words. His aura grows heavy, causing all the guards to sweat nervously, unsure of what kind of pressure they're feeling. They begin to wonder if this is really the same imbecile of Ragnar they thought they knew. The guards come to a terrifying realization: while Theo has been treated like a joke for so long, he still has the right to succession. He carries Ragnar's direct bloodline. Ragnar, after all, is the Lord of the North and ruler of the 6 snow clans. Declaring death to one of Ragnar's bloodline would normally result in swift retribution, with an entire clan potentially being wiped out. They now realize the situation has changed, and they need to apologize quickly. Before the guards can act, Theo coldly orders someone to kill them all. In the blink of an eye, swords flash, and all 4 guards lose their heads, one after another. Blood spills across the floor, but Theo remains unfazed. A familiar figure taps the ground. It's none other than Evelyn. She wipes the blood off her blade, shocking everyone in the room. Even Action didn't expect to see her here. Theo's quest progress hits 70%. Evelyn calmly asks Theo when he realized she was following him. He laughs, saying it was obvious. He's not entirely sure why, but having her here will allow him to turn the tables without any worries. Standing before the 4 headless bodies and the unconscious Ian, we flash back to a scene with Julius. He's popping open a bottle of wine, remarking that Evelyn once told him she wouldn't take on any more disciples, which means Theo must be someone special to her. Evelyn brushes it off, but Julius presses, asking if she doesn't have somewhere to be. He teases that his recent joy has been tormenting her. She comments that the wine is expensive, to which he responds by chugging it, grinning. Evelyn, realizing she can't argue with him, admits that Theo's talent is exceptional. Among all her disciples, he's the best. Julius, recalling that Action also trained under her, asks if that means Theo is better. Evelyn confirms that in terms of potential, Theo far surpasses Action. These are not empty words, either. Julius laughs, saying she's always had a sharp eye for things and should have seen this long before him. He then sighs, asking if that means Theo has been hiding his strength this whole time, as people can't change that drastically overnight. Evelyn agrees, noting that it's odd for someone who has concealed their true power to suddenly flaunt it. She's concerned that Theo might be rushing into things, as his sudden change seems like he's being chased by something. His attendance at this banquet also carries that same weight. Julius, sensing her worry, puts down the wine and says it's probably because of Action. He advises her to follow Theo to ease her mind. Evelyn asks what he means, and Julius hints that it might not be what she's concerned about, but something significant will definitely happen when young wolves thirsting for blood gather together. He encourages her to try and tempt Theo to join their ranks, and if she wants, she's welcome to return as well. Julius even teases her about how she still longs for her old group, placing a uniform on the table. He invites her to come back and take responsibility, especially after she gets Theo to join them. He then leaves, remarking that the wine was fantastic, while Evelyn watches in disbelief. She grumbles that it only tasted good because it was expensive. Back at Camellia Palace, Evelyn observes Theo and realizes he must have orchestrated everything from the start. She now wonders if he planned to attend the banquet aiming for this exact outcome and if he was someone she needn't have worried about all along. She contemplates when exactly he noticed her presence. But, of course, Theo had sensed her the moment he entered the carriage. As a possessor of a dragon heart, he has enhanced energy perception, akin to a sixth sense. With the stage now set, Theo addresses Evelyn, stating that most of the people here have disrespected a successor candidate and asks what the punishment is for such an offense. Evelyn responds that, according to clan law, immediate execution is an option. Theo laughs, saying since they're all just kids who haven't even undergone their awakening ceremonies, they should lose an arm each, and that will suffice. Without hesitation, Evelyn charges into the crowd, cutting off the arms of everyone who had mocked Theo. As she does, Theo calls out their names and their family status, making it clear how insignificant they are compared to the power of the Ragnar family. By the end of Evelyn's ruthless spree, Theo's quest progress hits 79%. One man, trembling, grabs onto Action's pants, begging him to intervene. Action looks down at him, asking why he should help in the first place, adding that this is merely a greeting. The man, confused, looks back, but before he can say anything else, Evelyn's sword flashes, severing his arm. The man screams in agony on the floor. Evelyn and Action exchange glances. Action remarks that he never expected to see her again like this. Evelyn, calm and collected, replies that it's been a while. The quest progress hits 82%. Action observes that Evelyn only targeted those who made comments about the bloodline. Theo had made it clear that even as a fellow successor candidate, not even he could halt Evelyn's actions. Evelyn turned her head toward Theo, reporting that she had severed the right arms of the 14 individuals he had commanded her to. He complimented her, saying, "Good job," and asked her for a status update. She informed him that if they hurried to a priest, the arms could be reattached, but their future as swordsmen would be uncertain. Theo nodded, stating that was sufficient. Remington, concerned, asked Theo if he was all right. Action, observing how close both Evelyn and Remington were to Theo, realized that Theo had truly changed. He was no longer burdened by the title of imbecile. A chuckle escaped Action, but it quickly turned into seething anger, and he expressed his desire to crush Theo even more now. Theo, unfazed, said it was time to leave, and both Evelyn and Remington followed him. As Theo walked past Action, he tapped his arm, smirking as he waved goodbye, saying he had fun. This final gesture was the last hurdle Theo had to overcome, and his escape from the title of imbecile was now complete. He told Action he'd see him later, and a notification appeared, declaring the completion of the tutorial quest. Action, enraged, screamed Theo's name as Theo relished the thought that his quest was finally over. However, he knew this was only the first step toward his true revenge. His rewards included an experience elixir, which would grant him 5 level ups as long as he remained under level 30, though there were likely more rewards yet to be revealed. As the sun set, back in the Camellia Palace, Emile was working on some papers. She was visibly shocked by something her attendant had just told her and demanded he repeat it. She isn't going to like this, he thought. The scene shifted to a lively tavern, a stark contrast to the noble banquet they had just attended. Sybil was leading the celebrations, loudly cheering for Theo and his successful debut in society. The trainees were in high spirits, enjoying themselves, and even Theo allowed himself to relax and join in with the revelry. This place felt much more comfortable than the stiff and pretentious noble party. Meanwhile, back in the Camellia Palace, a sharp sound echoed a slap. It was Emile, berating Action. She furiously demanded to know how he could let that imbecile justify his actions and even allow people's arms to be cut off. Action, looking to the side, muttered a weak acknowledgement. This only enraged her more as she shouted that she had warned him repeatedly not to take things lightly. Instead of pressuring Theo into submission, he had given him the grounds to act freely. She reminded him that she had already warned him that if Theo stood out, it would make it much more difficult to take control of the Rose Palace. The scene panned to the view of the Rose Palace from their window, something the audience had not known was so close by. Action tried to reassure her that he would handle it, but Emile wasn't having it. She snapped that she didn't want to hear any more excuses. He needed to reflect on his failure and how he had nearly ruined her meticulously crafted plan with his reckless pursuit of shallow enjoyment. Bitterly, Action promised to keep that in mind. Emile, fanning herself to cool down, wondered aloud whom Action took after to be so impulsive. A voice from the shadows responded. It was Ed, who remarked that Action resembled her when she was younger. Emile shot him a withering glare, asking if that was supposed to be a joke. Ed, unfazed, advised her not to be too angry. He believed that this incident might not be as terrible as it seemed. Curious, she asked why. Ed explained that since the Rose Palace had once been part of the clan head's harem, it had been difficult to claim ownership over it. Though it had fallen out of favor and had become a gathering place for third-rate individuals, it still held the backing of the clan head. To take it over, they needed justification, and Theo's actions at the banquet had provided just that. Ed continued, explaining that Theo was slowly becoming the representative of the Rose Palace, and using the incident where he cut off the arms of several people, they could now move forward with legal proceedings to suppress him. Emile closed her fan, her mood shifting instantly, and asked Ed how long it would take to set their plan into motion. Ed chuckled, informing her that the preparations were already complete, and by tomorrow morning, she would receive some delightful news. He even prepared an aromatic candle from the volcanic region of Akron for her to enjoy a relaxing bath before bed. Their closeness was unsettling, almost inappropriate for siblings, as Emile wrapped her arms around Ed, praising him as always and saying that this was why she adored him so much. The atmosphere was eerily intimate. Back at the tavern, Remington expressed his surprise. He was still in disbelief over how much Theo had stood up for him. Theo, confused, asked what he was talking about, wondering if Remington had had too much to drink, even though he'd only been sipping orange juice. Remington clarified that he was talking about the banquet. While Remington had been willing to endure the insults aimed at himself, the moment they insulted Theo's friend, Theo had immediately acted without hesitation. Remington admitted he had done nothing to defend himself and found it embarrassing. Looking at Theo, Remington realized how extraordinary he truly was. Despite all the ridicule he had faced for being an untalented, illegitimate child, Theo had grown into a formidable person. Not only that, but even when confronted by enemies he stood little chance against, he had the courage and resolve to emerge victorious. Theo had gone up against the formidable Camellia Palace, a force that no one else dared to challenge, yet he wielded his sword without hesitation, all for the sake of defending a friend. Using his observational skills, Theo notices that Remington believes Theo's actions at the banquet were driven by how much he cares for him. Theo, however, tells him that he seems to be misunderstanding something. Remington, ignoring the comment, reveals that although his clan head had instructed him to build ties with Action, he's had a change of heart. He declares that, from now on, he wishes to follow Theo instead. The other trainees, witnessing this, get excited, shouting that it's only natural for the strong to recognize strength in others. Theo, still unconvinced, insists that Remington is misunderstanding things. At that moment, he hears Evelyn's voice in his mind, using telepathy to tell him to just let Remington be. Startled, Theo glances over at her and sees her smiling. She says it's not a bad misunderstanding, after all, and perhaps everyone just wants to get along with him. Theo sighs, surprised, and says he's really not anyone special. Reflecting for a moment, he considers that everything might be because of the message window he has. Whether it's his regression to the past, acquiring Ragnar's talents, or becoming stronger, he can't quite pin down what it is. At first, he thought it might be fragments of his regret, but the window is far too detailed for that. A vague sense of déjà vu nags at him, but he concludes that since it's been helping him, it doesn't matter. As the banquet wraps up, Theo notices his level has gone up. He realizes that each level up grants him stat points that he can allocate however he wants, allowing him to enhance his abilities at will. He finds this both thrilling and frightening, and he gets excited at the thought of how powerful he could become. But first, he knows he needs to prepare for the inevitable counterattack from the Camellia Palace. Turning to Remington, he gives him the nickname Remy and says, "Since you've mentioned it, maybe you can help me with something." Remington, eager, agrees and asks what Theo needs, before noting how Theo just called him Remy. Theo pulls out a piece of paper and tells him that the battle for the throne between him and Action is about to intensify. To prepare, he really wants Remy's help. Remington is taken aback by this, but Theo explains that in the future, Remington will become the head of the Narrow Clan, and their forces will grow strong enough to rival even the Ragnars. Theo adds that Remington's strength and leadership are symbolized by the Silver Lion and that he hopes to have him on his side. Theo then hands Remington an envelope, saying he really hopes Remy will take it. Still surprised, Remington accepts the envelope and pledges to follow Theo, saying that if there's anything he can do to help, he will. Theo laughs, thanking him, while Remington again points out how Theo called him Remy. Just then, someone shouts Theo's name from behind the door. The door bursts open, and a group of knights enters. Everyone in the room is shocked. The knights, known as the Swords of the Law, essentially medieval knight cops, present Theo with a warrant for his arrest on charges of threat, assault, and intimidation. Evelyn, outraged, demands to know what nonsense this is, but Theo calmly tells her to relax. Walking over to the warrant, Theo notices the ink is still wet, indicating they were in a rush. Smirking, he tells the knights he's ready to go. They handcuff him and lead him out. Remington calls out to Theo, who turns around with a grin. Both Theo and Evelyn realize that this is likely part of Theo's larger plan. They exchange a knowing look, glancing at the envelope still in Remington's hand. At the banquet, she sighs, murmuring to herself, who would have thought that his invitation would lead to this? Despite her worries, she holds faith that Theo will get through it because that's the kind of resilient kid he is. Gazing out the window with hope, she quietly wishes for Theo's safe return. Meanwhile, Theo, now inside a carriage, is being escorted away by the night watch. Peering out the window, he comments to himself, "It's been a while since I've been here." As the view of the tribunal comes into sight, a grand, imposing structure, he mutters that his actions at the banquet won't result in mere imprisonment. He's certain this will lead to a trial. After all, bringing Ragnar's successor to the tribunal signals that they're questioning his worthiness as the next in line. Upon arrival, the knights order him to step out, and Theo realizes they likely want to crush him completely. A grin spreads across his face, though, as he thinks, "That's exactly what I'm hoping for." As they escort him in, one knight announces, "We've brought Theo," and a commanding voice from within instructs them to bring him forward. As the doors open, Theo thinks to himself, "If I'm going to reveal what I've prepared, it should be on a stage this grand." He steps into the chamber to find 4 figures seated above him in throne-like chairs, scrutinizing him from above. Theo feels a bead of sweat trickling down, noting, quite the impressive gathering. Among them, he recognizes Julius and Ed, as 4 of the 9 dragons who protect Ragnar are present. Reflecting on his past life, Theo acknowledges that he would have been so overwhelmed in this situation that he might not have been able to breathe. The scene introduces us to the Lady of the Plum Blossom Palace, Osa Ragnar, also known as the Sword Dragon. The Elder Dragon and Head Counselor, Wolfgang Ragnar, is there as well. Wolfgang calls out Theo's name, and Theo nods in response, saying it's been a while and that he didn't expect to encounter him here. Theo notes that Wolfgang highly values bloodlines and likely considers him an illegitimate half-blood, distasteful, something the man doesn't even try to conceal. Wolfgang cuts off any pleasantries, sternly stating that Theo is here to answer for his misdeeds. He recounts all the people who suffered and lost limbs, emphasizing that due to Theo's reckless actions, many now threaten to sever ties with the family. He questions if a bastard like Theo can bear the consequences of the damage he's inflicted, adding that he will hold Theo accountable for dragging Ragnar's honor through the mud. Unfazed, Theo replies exactly as Wolfgang has described, admitting he was far too reckless. Wolfgang sighs, but then Theo, with an intense gaze, adds that he should have gone further by severing heads, not merely limbs. Everyone in the chamber reacts with surprise as the atmosphere shifts, becoming sharp and tense. Theo continues, passionately asserting that the subjects of a lord are granted land and honor, and in return, they owe loyalty in their lives. That's the essence of chivalry. He bellows, "How dare they threaten their lord? Had I known they'd be this insolent, I would have beheaded them without hesitation. They must be punished if the principles of chivalry are to be restored. How could I sit by while Ragnar's 1,000-year-old honor is being trampled?" Wolfgang nearly rises from his seat in anger, but Julius chuckles, admiring Theo's boldness and muttering that a simple punishment won't suffice for this. Wolfgang, fuming, accuses Theo of mocking him with such sophistry. OSA speaks up, saying that while Theo's opinion may be controversial, he is theoretically correct. Wolfgang, startled, wonders why OSA seems to agree with Theo, but she goes on to explain that Ragnar, though strong, would never truly be great if it ignored the voices of its knights and vassals. To rule through tyranny alone is a surefire path to downfall. Taking this in, Theo responds, "I'll be sure to keep that in mind." We finally learn more about OSA. She is the clan head's first wife and one of the North's greatest swordsmen. Surprisingly, she doesn't appear hostile toward Theo, though he recalls that she had something to do with the fall of the Rose Palace in his previous life. OSA tells him she hopes he understands that his punishment will be justified. Theo asks what punishment he's to receive, and Wolfgang hesitates before declaring that he'll serve 3 months of probation. Theo objects, noting that the awakening ceremony is only 2 months away. Wolfgang snaps at him for talking back, but OSA reassures Theo, saying she considered the timing and has arranged for him to participate in next year's ceremony. It's also been decided that the 15 children Theo injured will join him in next year's event. Ed, seated nearby, remarks that, due to the demon dragon's interference, Theo's punishment ended up lighter than expected. We then see Ed conversing with others, explaining that while the lighter punishment isn't ideal, it serves his plan. With the awakening ceremony delayed, Theo will bear great dishonor within Ragnar, and as the Rose Palace's representative, this dishonor will give the Camellia Palace an opportunity to overtake them. Ed contemplates that if Theo tries to fight back, they could simply kill him, though he doubts Theo would be that foolish. But his thoughts are interrupted when Theo unexpectedly announces his intention to appeal. Shock ripples through the room at Theo's brazen decision, and Ed begins to laugh, covering his face with his hand, calling Theo an idiot and saying his arrogance knows no bounds. This, he notes, will make things even easier for him. Julius turns to Theo, asking if he understands what an appeal truly entails. Theo nods, responding that he's well aware this isn't a matter that can usually be resolved with just 3 months probation, something Julius likely helped to arrange as a mere slap on the wrist. In the proud and powerful Ragnar, appealing means war, and he has no intention of accepting a simple slap on the wrist. He adds that only the victor's voice is heard, and he expects to be rewarded, not punished. At this, a blue notification in Theo's status window appears, showing he's about to enter the main scenario, and we see OSA and Julius exchange surprised looks. The status window explains that by completing the scenario, Theo can uncover many secrets hidden in this world, wishing him success as the Successor's Path quest begins. Meanwhile, we jump to the Sarah Merchant Guild's branch, now engulfed in flames. Amongst the burning chaos, mercenaries lay slain on the ground, some cut to pieces. Remington observes the destruction, muttering, "So this is where they were hiding," just as young Lord Theo said. He and Evelyn look down at a small chest, concluding that with this discovery, Camellia Palace is finished. Back at the tribunal, a heavy silence lingers before Wolfgang finally speaks, asking Theo if he truly plans to turn a matter that could be settled with 3 months of probation into a full-fledged war. He accuses Theo of being arrogant beyond belief, questioning if he really thinks he can face the might of the 15 clans alone. Theo calmly replies that he will handle it, noting that in cases like this, where there's a vast imbalance of power, appeals are usually resolved through proxy battles. Julius nods, explaining that while appeals typically mean settling matters through war, when a battle is near impossible due to power disparity, each side may send a representative for a one-on-one duel, the proxy battle Theo mentioned. In this case, Theo would represent himself as the defendant, while it's likely that Axion will represent the plaintiff, a match almost guaranteed to end in Theo's loss. Julius wonders why Theo would make such a reckless choice, suspecting he might be banking on Julius or Evelyn stepping in as his proxy. Yet, he knows they won't, meaning Theo will inevitably face Axion alone. Ed confirms this, announcing he will send Axion, who will make Theo understand his place through death. As Ed continues to outline the representatives, a cold, powerful voice suddenly cuts through, sending chills down everyone's spine. Someone remarks that he thought Theo was a quiet child, but now, seeing him involved in such clever schemes, it's clear he's changed a lot since their last encounter. Calling Theo his son, we are introduced to the Ragnar clan head, Kyle Ragnar, a towering figure who commands attention. All 9 dragons present at the tribunal greet him respectfully, as does Theo, who bows, greeting Kyle as the incarnation of the great dragon god. Theo's status window lights up once more, revealing that his next objective is to take over the Camellia Palace and uncover its secrets, marking the beginning of his first tutorial quest. Reflecting that the blue notification from earlier was the key to the palace's secrets, he regrets not pursuing it during the banquet. He quickly brushes off the thought, focusing his attention as he looks up to meet his father's intense gaze, watching Kyle Ragnar approach. Theo steels himself, muttering that he has to handle this first. An unexpected variable has just appeared, and his carefully laid plans could quickly unravel. He wonders what brings his father here. Kyle then commands him to stand, explaining that he had heard of Theo's predicament by chance on his way here and is aware that Theo's situation is rather complex. He mentions that he learned Theo wants to make an appeal through a proxy battle. Theo hesitates momentarily before confirming. Kyle considers this, saying that if Theo's plan involves a proxy, it'll be challenging, and he asks who Theo intended to choose as his representative. Realizing this is a test, Theo replies that there's no one who could represent him and that he planned to fight himself. At this, Ed senses something amiss, growing uneasy. Kyle tells Theo he'll likely lose, but Theo meets his gaze steadily, replying that he can't know that without trying, and even if forced to yield, he won't willingly bow. Kyle starts to grin, then laughs heartily, proclaiming to everyone present that these words define his son. Even if he's made to bend, he will not lower himself. He commends Theo, calling this attitude the very essence of a Ragnar. Theo thanks him, explaining that the proxy battle is just bait, he doesn't intend to actually fight, and it's refreshing to be able to admit it freely. The work he assigned to Evelyn and Remington will prove Camellia Palace's treason, securing his victory without bloodshed. But then, Kyle takes it a step further, declaring that he will personally grant Theo an opportunity. As Ragnar's leader, he wishes to test Theo with a single strike. Theo is taken aback, unsure if Kyle is serious, but Kyle calmly orders him to follow outside, declaring that if Theo can withstand this one strike, all charges will be dropped. Ed, visibly panicked, shouts in protest. He realizes that if Kyle is testing Theo, it means he's ready to approve of him as a potential leader. Even though Ed doubts Theo can survive the blow, he knows that if he somehow does, he'll gain the clan head's approval, a fact Ed can't tolerate. With a controlled tone, Ed objects, insisting that the tribunal should continue as planned. Kyle, unfazed, cuts him off coldly, telling Ed that any vassal brazen enough to speak out against the Ragnar bloodline should simply be dealt with. Ed bites his lip, grumbling that he understands. Kyle then turns his attention to Julius, who has been stifling laughter, asking if he has something to add, since he seems amused. Julius brushes it off, saying it's just been a while since Kyle has shown such keen interest. Kyle waves him off, calling it nonsense, and dismisses the small talk, turning back to Theo, asking if he intends to go through with the challenge. Theo pauses, thinking about the fact that this single strike from his father has altered everything, dismantling his original plan entirely. Yet he begins to chuckle, welcoming the unexpected change. Smiling, he tells his father that his blow seems too heavy, asking how a single strike from him could compare to a proxy battle with mere vassals. Kyle raises an eyebrow, asking if Theo intends to refuse. Theo clarifies that he merely wanted to express how unfair it is, but he has no intention of declining. Kyle, intrigued, asks what he means by unfair, and Theo boldly suggests that, since the trial has become so severe, shouldn't his reward be greater? Amused, Kyle asks what Theo has in mind. Theo scans the room, fixing his gaze on Ed, who stares back warily, and confidently states that he would like something akin to Camellia Palace. Ed clenches his fists, struggling to keep his anger in check. Wolfgang watches, thinking Theo must be mad to propose a deal with the clan head. A deal assumes both parties are equals, and he mutters that Theo's arrogance will lead to his ruin. But his shock deepens as Kyle, surprisingly, agrees, saying that if Theo truly aims to become his successor, he'll need that kind of boldness. He then turns to Ed, asking if he has any objections. Ed, seething, replies that everything within Ragnar's domain belongs to Kyle, so he couldn't possibly question his decision. Kyle smirks, declaring that everything is settled and ordering preparations to be made. He will test Theo Ragnar here and now. Theo stands in the arena, visibly anxious, while across from him, Kyle watches, preparing to unleash his strike. 4 of the 9 dragons observe closely, along with Ed, who sneers to himself that his trap to ensnare Theo has somehow transformed into a platform to elevate him. Ed reminds himself that, even if Theo has grown stronger, there's no chance he can withstand a single blow from the clan head, a feat that even high-ranked swordsmen would find daunting. Theo must fail here, he thinks, as Theo clearly occupies every inch of his thoughts. But Theo, sensing Ed's intentions, smiles subtly. Unbeknownst to Ed, Theo is fully prepared to handle this, thanks to a tutorial reward he recently received. Kyle narrows his eyes, noting something different in Theo's demeanor, and asks if Theo took an elixir in secret. He remarks that even if Theo had, such rapid improvement would be unlikely, and adds that he's interested in seeing just how strong Theo has become. Theo admits Kyle is sharp, even the 9 dragons hadn't noticed, but confirms he's ready. Kyle then points out that, though he usually wields a greatsword, he'll be using a rusty steel blade this time, out of fairness, since Theo doesn't yet know how to use mana. He asks if Theo has any objections. Theo, keeping his voice steady, says he has none. Kyle releases his fiery red aura in a powerful wave, the pressure forcing Theo to stagger slightly. With his blade aimed downward, Kyle tells Theo to prepare himself. Theo trembles under the sheer force of Kyle's fighting spirit but maintains eye contact, saying he can endure it. He notes that his strength has nearly tripled due to leveling up with the experience elixir, and he put all he could into building his strength. Feeling the raw power coursing through him, Theo muses that he's crossed into the extraordinary and believes he can handle a single strike from his father. However, as Kyle draws closer, Theo envisions him as an unscalable wall. The strike comes, and the tension mounts as the spectators watch in stunned silence, except for Count Brad, who secretly hopes Theo will fail. As the strike lands, the ground shudders, and a shockwave blasts out from where their swords collide. Kyle, sensing something, immediately eases up, a satisfied laugh escaping him as he steps back. Theo's sword splinters and shatters, but Kyle, clearly impressed, chuckles, saying it's been a long time since he's felt so proud of a son. He then declares that Theo has proven his innocence, and the trial has concluded. Theo has passed out while still standing, completing the quest single strike of Kyle Ragnar. He's earned an inventory as well as a mysterious blue key as a reward. The scene shifts to Theo waking up in bed, disoriented. He sees Cecilia holding his hand, her face full of relief. She tells him he fainted while standing and that she's been worried. Theo assures her he's fine, asking where exactly he is. At that moment, Julius enters, informing Theo that the former lady of Camellia Palace, Axion, and the intelligence director have all been removed by order of the clan head. Theo's eyes widen, and he asks if this means what he thinks it does. Julius nods, grinning, confirming that Theo now resides within Camellia Palace. The scenario updates, and Theo's new task is to uncover the palace's secrets. Outside in the garden, we see Emile furiously stomping on a flower, railing against the injustice of being forced to leave her own palace. The butlers around her plead for her to stay calm, while Axion watches in silence. Ed, determined, walks over and calls out to Axion, who releases an intense killing intent and coldly asks what he wants. Ed insists that Theo Ragnar must be killed. Axion calmly suggests he could injure Theo during the awakening ceremony, perhaps take an arm, but Ed interrupts, demanding that he take Theo's head, convinced this is the only way to redeem the chaos Theo has caused. Axion studies him closely, noting his rat-tail hairstyle and apparent desperation. Meanwhile, back in Camellia Palace, Theo reflects on how things have unexpectedly shifted in his favor. Despite the drastic changes, he finds this outcome far better than he could have anticipated. He's gained control of the palace without even using his trump card, and he now holds a new ability called Inventory. Testing it, he reaches in, pulls out an apple, and takes a bite, marveling at the newfound convenience. Reaching in again, he retrieves the blue key, noting that it unlocks a dungeon. Looking around, Theo notices a bluish aura near a door and realizes the key is likely tied to it. Stepping closer, he spots a small blue keyhole embedded in the door. Theo fits the key into the lock and carefully opens the door, intrigued by what lies beyond. To his surprise, he's greeted by a vast cave. Wondering how something like this could even exist inside the palace, he suddenly sees a window appear before him, notifying him that he's discovered a dungeon for the first time, and as a bonus, he'll earn double experience for everything inside. Theo recognizes this as another quest and confidently steps forward, vowing to conquer it and maximize the experience rewards. Yet, he quickly stops himself, deciding it's foolish to enter unarmed. He dashes through the palace, gathering weapons and loading his inventory to the brim with swords, feeling much more prepared to face what lies ahead. As he ventures deeper into the cave, blue torches light up the stone walls, guiding him to a wide, open chamber. But then, to his shock, he spots a huge, silver wolf, its teeth bared in a menacing snarl. Noting its size, he realizes this wolf might be as powerful as a demonic beast. Without warning, the wolf lunges at him, and Theo raises his shield, but the beast's powerful bite punctures a hole right through it. Theo pushes forward, unwilling to lose in a test of strength, and swings his sword at the creature. But the wolf deftly evades, countering with incredible speed. Frustrated, Theo acknowledges that the wolf's hide is thick and impervious to weak attacks, while its agility makes it nearly impossible to land a strike. This creature is no ordinary wolf, it may even have the strength of a demonic beast from the dangerous northern seas. As it swipes a massive paw at him, Theo dodges and dashes underneath, mentally replaying his father's awe-inspiring, pure white strike. He raises his sword overhead, trying to emulate his father's flawless technique, but the wolf dodges effortlessly. Leaping back to create some distance, Theo realizes that simply imitating the skill won't work. He recalls the essence of his father's technique, known as the single strike, meant to deliver certain death in one blow, and he guesses the key may lie in channeling everything he has into one decisive move. Casting his shield aside, he decides to focus purely on speed and technique, incorporating Evelyn's teachings. He lunges forward with such blinding speed that the wolf momentarily loses sight of him. When the creature finally detects his presence, it's too late. Theo's blade is already thrust into its eye. Blood spurts from the wound as the wolf howls in agony, now one-eyed. Realizing he's finally gaining the upper hand, Theo steels himself for the finishing blow. He and the wolf launch at each other, ready for a decisive clash. 2 months later, on training ground number 4, a crowd of onlookers has grown. Among them, a man named Manuel notices the increased number of spectators, and Sybil, standing nearby, agrees, suggesting they might need a new training area altogether. Theo's single strike technique has drawn a steady stream of sparring challengers. Just then, an arrogant voice interrupts Henry Morris, an apprentice swordsman from Plum Blossom Palace, home to OSA, loudly questions when Theo will actually show up, commenting that he's been absent for 2 months. Mocking Theo's commitment, Henry suggests he probably fled, fearing his own exaggerations about winning the trial. Sybil, seething, listens as Henry continues, calling Theo's triumph over the tribunal a fake story and even questioning his win over the Camellia Palace as mere rumor. Before Henry can finish, Sybil's fist slams into his face, sending him sprawling across the ground. Henry's companion rushes over, shocked, yelling his name. Furious, he points a finger at Sybil, demanding to know how a mere dropout dared to strike him. But the trainees all glare back in support of Sybil. Without hesitation, Sybil insults Henry's skill and appearance, declaring that he's nothing compared to the young master. Manuel chides Sybil, telling him not to comment on someone else's appearance. Sybil shrugs, saying he never liked these troublemakers showing up and stirring things up, but now that they dare to insult Theo, they've crossed a line. At his words, all the trainees draw their swords, declaring that if this is war, their challengers better be prepared to back up their words. Henry's friend smirks, saying these dropouts must really have a death wish. Suddenly, a chill fills the air, and Henry's friend's sword, along with Sybil, is frozen in place. An icy barrier has materialized, separating the two sides. It's none other than Ragnar, one of the four hounds of the north, known as the Frost Sword. Sybil is shocked, wondering when she even arrived. Another voice chuckles, calling out that they couldn't leave him out of the fun. It's Hulkus, another member of the four hounds, known as the Black Bear, approaching the training grounds. Sybil, already surprised by Ray's presence, is stunned to see Hulkus there as well. Hulkus scans the crowd and scoffs, disappointed that there are only trainees present. He demands to know where Luster Tiger is, the supposed master of the training ground. Hulkus, wielding an oversized blade reminiscent of the Dragon Slayer, shouts, asking if the guy is deaf and repeating his demand for Luster Tiger. Without a word, Ray stands by, and it's clear Hulkus is referring to Theo. It cuts back to Theo, deep in the dungeon, panting heavily, clearly exhausted, his sword shattered. A notification window pops up, telling him he's leveled up, and not just once, he's gained multiple levels. Theo, resting atop a large wolf's corpse, realizes he's taken down a total of 170 demonic beasts, leaving only one remaining. He uncorks a potion, chugging it, thinking about how close he came to death on multiple occasions, and marvels at how this potion has saved his life. What seemed impossible at first has gradually gotten easier with each level he gained. Thinking about the intense grind, Theo notes it's already been 2 months since he entered the dungeon. Looking around at the cave's dim glow, he senses a powerful presence nearby, realizing that with only one beast left, the final challenge must be close. He readies himself, knowing this encounter can only mean one thing: a boss fight is coming. Theo steps onto the 5th floor of the dungeon, heading up the stairs and examining his broken blade. He sighs, realizing it's completely unusable now. After tossing it aside, he reaches into his inventory and pulls out the last sword he has left, a ceremonial blade his mother gave him as a birthday gift. This answers his earlier question about whether he had any swords left. In his previous life, there had been a lot of tension between him and his mother leading up to the awakening ceremony, and he'd left this blade to rust in his room. Now, as he inspects it, he realizes it's actually a quality sword, forged from rare white snow steel. Regret fills him as he recalls that he never treasured it. We get a flashback of his mother opening his door, her face lighting up with joy as she wishes him a happy birthday, eager to shower him with gifts. Instead of appreciating her gesture, he had yelled, saying he had no time for birthday presents with the awakening ceremony approaching. He told her that no equipment could change his bloodline, and demanded she leave. The look of pain on her face had been clear, and it stings him even now. Reflecting on his past, he vows not to repeat his mistakes in this life. As he approaches the boss room, a warning screen appears, notifying him that a powerful demonic beast is about to emerge and to proceed with caution. Theo tenses up as the creature comes into view: scales, a dragon-like snout, and a hulking blue form. It's a lesser drake, peacefully sleeping. Theo is thankful it's not a full dragon, but still notes the resemblance, recalling that Ragnars are said to be descendants of dragons. He wonders if it's a mere coincidence that the final boss of this quest is draconic. Regardless, he knows one thing: defeating this beast is the only way to complete his quest and perhaps uncover the dungeon's secrets. Although unsure if he can actually win, Theo steels himself, acknowledging that, dragon or not, he must face it. He decides his best option is to use the single flash technique he's practiced. He's perfected it against the wolves, and although it's nowhere near as powerful as his father's skill, Dragon Strike Flash, it should be enough. Blue aura flares around him as he charges forward, his entire focus on the creature. The lesser drake opens its eyes just as Theo brings his blade down with all the strength he can muster, aiming to harness his dragon heart to its fullest. Blood sprays through the air as Theo's strike lands, wounding the lesser drake, which begins to react to the assault. The drake roars in pain, and Theo is relieved his attack landed. But before he can fully react, the drake retaliates with a swift tail swipe. Theo dodges to the side, muttering that he'd hoped to pierce its brain, though his attack didn't quite go deep enough. Still, with the creature now partially blinded, he feels he has the upper hand. Ready to press his advantage, he grips his blade and uses a technique called Jester's footwork, dancing around the drake and slicing it repeatedly. He begins to think he might actually win. Positioning himself behind its leg, Theo plans to distract it with a normal attack before going for a weak point. However, the lesser drake unleashes its fear ability, releasing a bone-chilling yell that shakes Theo to his core. The fear status effect slows his movements by 10%, and Theo finds his body less responsive. The drake doesn't waste time, slamming a paw down on him. Though he manages to raise his sword in defense, the force of the impact sends him crashing into the wall with a loud bang. As the dust settles, blood drips from Theo's head, and he mutters, "This really is a boss battle, and I can't afford to let it drag on." Both he and the drake charge at each other, and Theo knows he needs to aim for its weak point. As he studies the beast, his gaze falls on its mouth, then to its neck, where he spots the reverse scale. A dragon's weak spot, he realizes. He thrusts his sword directly into the scale, and, to his surprise, it pierces through. The drake, feeling the blow, roars in agony as Theo strikes repeatedly, like a man possessed. Though injured, the drake isn't down yet. It turns, enraged, snapping its jaws at Theo. Back at the training ground, the trainees find their swords frozen solid. Hulkus yells, demanding a match with Theo, but dismisses him as a loser, noting that his skill hasn't changed much. This provokes Hulkus, who challenges her to a duel, insisting he's closed the skill gap in the last 3 years. He swings his massive sword at her, but easily blocks it with the side of her blade. Watching the exchange, Syl and Henry exchange nervous glances. Suddenly, another figure steps forward. It's Remy, who steps in to block both Ree and Hulkus, scolding them for causing trouble on Theo's turf and insisting that they take their fight elsewhere. Hulkus, undeterred, declares he's wanted a duel with Remy as well. Remy's tone turns deadly as he warns them both to leave, and his killing intent silences the arena. But then, an even more powerful killing aura fills the air. Ree glances around, curious, as Remy mutters, shocked, what happened to him during his training? It's Theo, approaching slowly, his gaze cold and fierce, as he radiates the drake's fear ability. In a flashback, we see Theo landing the final blow on the scarred drake as it falls dead at his feet. The system congratulates him on successfully hunting a lesser drake, and, exhausted, Theo admits he nearly lost when he touched the reverse scale. Fortunately, it wore itself out over time, and he's relieved the scale's weak spot wasn't a myth. His rewards include a lesser drake's tooth and claw, both of which are valuable enhancement materials for crafting weapons. Theo inspects his mother's gifted sword, deciding to use these materials to restore it after it's worn down from the fight. His final reward, the lesser drake scale, surprises him. It's a D-ranked item with 1% mastery, allowing him to release a killing intent unique to drakes, inflicting fear on anyone weaker than him. Only a select few can wield this power, and Theo marvels at the opportunity to harness it. Tossing his spoils into his inventory, he admits he's not certain how useful the scale will be, considering the powerhouses in Ragnar. Regardless, with the dungeon of Camellia Palace now cleared, Theo is ready for what comes next. Theo exits the room, closing the door behind him, and says that with this, the quest is now completed. As a reward for clearing the scenario quest, he'll receive a special item. Something materializes in front of him, and as he reaches out, he finds it's called the Nest Compass, a tool that guides the holder toward the nest. He wonders what this could be, guessing it might have something to do with his next quest. Shrugging, he stows it in his inventory, figuring he'll look into it later, and notes how exhausted he feels. He decides to return to his room to rest. Just as he's about to head off, one of the maids rushes down the hallway, visibly alarmed. She tells Theo there's an urgent matter he needs to handle and is shocked to see him out of the dungeon. When she asks where he's been, Theo simply responds with a quick, "What's going on?" She tells him there's a brawl happening at training ground number 4, and in a flash, he recalls the current situation there. Back in training ground 4, the scene resumes with Theo using the Drake's Fear ability. His intense aura overwhelms everyone, and he scowls, telling them all to leave since he needs to rest. Henry's lackeys, visibly shaken, start foaming at the mouth, while Henry, horrified, screams that the aura is practically toxic. One by one, they start collapsing from the pressure. Hulkus laughs at the chaos, impressed with the killing intent, and charges at Theo, declaring that he knew Theo would be a worthy challenge and eager to see his strength firsthand. He swings his massive sword down on Theo, but Theo deflects it with an upward swing, sending Hulkus flying backward. Remy, along with the others, looks on in shock, as even Hulkus is stunned by how easily Theo repelled his attack. Internally, Theo is a bit surprised that he actually managed to deflect Hulkus's strike. Hulkus, regaining his balance, smirks and charges in again, telling Theo he won't back down so easily. Theo recalls that Hulkus, while considered the weakest of the four hounds, was still powerful in terms of brute strength. As Hulkus comes in for another heavy strike, Theo uses the single slash technique, smoothly deflecting Hulkus's blade down the side of his own and countering in a seamless, precise motion. To his own amazement, Theo's blow lands cleanly on Hulkus, causing him to cough up blood as a deep wound opens across his abdomen. Hulkus stumbles, bleeding heavily, and falls to the ground, defeated. Theo notes, a bit shocked, that he used his full strength without realizing it, and thinks it's lucky Hulkus is only unconscious since anyone else might not have survived. Sybil and the other trainees are stunned for a moment before erupting in cheers, shouting that Theo has just taken down the Black Bear, one of the four hounds, in a single strike. Theo waves them down, reminding them that Hulkus is still alive. But as he's saying this, his sword suddenly snaps and falls to the floor in pieces. Staring down at it in dismay, Theo realizes with dread that it was the sword his mother had gifted him. The trainees only seem to get more excited, declaring in awe that Theo even broke his own sword with a single, powerful strike. Theo looks at the group around him and asks why they're so happy about his broken sword. Nearby, Remy and Ree are observing, with Ray glaring at Theo. It seems she's deep in thought, remembering a memory from years ago. In a flashback, we see a little boy asking someone who they are, and it's revealed to be a young Ray. The boy quickly wraps his scarf around her, noticing she still looks cold, and insists that she come to his house until the snow lets up. The boy is none other than a young Theo, who assures her he'll take her home once the storm passes. Ray smiles as she remembers this moment and quickly turns away, leaving Remy wondering if he just saw her smile. Later, back at the Camellia Palace, Theo is wearing a new hat, and the maids are congratulating him on his recent title, Luster Tiger. They tell him he's worked so hard, and now he just has to keep up the momentum until the awakening ceremony. His mother then brings out a table full of food, showing her excitement, though she can't help but rant a bit while stuffing his mouth with food. Theo wishes she would stop talking, but seeing her happy, he reflects on her sad fate in his past life and how he once treated her. This time, he chooses to embrace the moment and tells her that the food is delicious. After a while, he shows her the broken sword. She screams, asking what happened, and he tells her it broke during training. He apologizes, feeling bad that her precious gift was damaged. Furious, she blames the damn old man, and Theo is taken aback as she explains that the man swore it was crafted with white snow steel and ebony steelwood, claiming it would never break. Theo, puzzled, asks if she means ebony steelwood from the southern Gaia jungle, and she confirms, saying the old man assured her it was made of rare and precious materials, yet here they are with a broken sword. Theo is impressed, explaining that ebony steelwood is rare because it's a plant that grows by feeding on iron, giving it the flexibility of wood but the strength of steel. He knew it was a fine weapon, but he didn't realize it was that valuable and wonders where she managed to get such a sword. But Cecilia dismisses his apologies, saying this won't do. She decides to get a new sword from the best workshop in Winra and refuses to let him attend the awakening ceremony with its shabby old sword. Though Theo offers to use another one, she insists, stating that people are finally seeing his true worth and he needs to uphold that image. She then heads off, saying they'll go immediately, and he follows, asking where they're going. She declares it's time for a custom weapon at the Basque workshop. At the Basque workshop, one of the three great weapon manufacturers of Winra, Theo is amazed. Known for its sheer size, which rivals a factory, it's most famous for its master craftsman and elite blacksmith of special rank. Suddenly, a woman appears, and Cecilia, calling her mother, yells at her to stop smoking. Theo is shocked, he never knew his mother had family, thinking she was an orphan. The woman, Chiron, a high elf known as the Elf of Capitalism incarnate and demon craftsman, responds coolly, saying their relationship as mother and daughter ended when Cecilia chose to leave home. Stunned, Theo realizes that this revelation makes him a quarter elf, musing to himself that this must be why he's so strikingly handsome. Chiron then asks why Cecilia has suddenly come to visit, and Cecilia tosses her the broken sword, saying she's here to return it defective product. Chiron catches the sword, surprised at her accusation, and when she draws the sword from its scabbard, she's visibly shocked to see it broken. Cecilia tells her that if this isn't a defective product, she doesn't know what is. Chiron, intrigued, asks who wielded it, and Cecilia says, "Who else but my son?" Chiron looks Theo over and asks if he's really the kid standing behind Cecilia. Cecilia bristles, telling Chiron to watch her mouth, saying Theo is a genius destined to rule over Ragnar. Theo then formally introduces himself, expressing how honored he is to meet the famed master of the Basque workshop. Chiron acknowledges she's heard of him, but quickly shifts back to the topic, questioning if he was truly the one who wielded the blade. Theo confirms, and Cecilia insists again that the sword was defective. Chiron, looking like she has a lot to say, tells them this conversation is going to be long and motions for them to follow her inside. As they walk, Theo asks Cecilia how she's related to the master craftsman. Cecilia replies that it's exactly as he's heard. Theo clarifies, asking if Chiron is really her mother. Cecilia, in a thoughtful tone, explains that for a short period of 6 months, Chiron acted as her foster mother. His headcanon of her as a pure elf dissipates. Cecilia goes on to say that Chiron has a deep love for anything she finds beautiful, be it jewels, music, theater, or even people. That's why she was taken in as Chiron's foster daughter. She must have liked her a great deal. Chiron, sounding annoyed, tells Cecilia to stop reminiscing, calling it pointless. Cecilia laughs, saying that Chiron doesn't truly believe that. Theo asks how Cecilia ended up leaving the workshop. Just as Cecilia begins to answer, Chiron interrupts, saying Cecilia walked away on her own, determined to become the wife of Ragnar's clan head. She scoffs, calling it foolish to leave for such a miserable place, though she grudgingly admits it's impressive that Cecilia has survived this long. Cecilia grins, saying she left because the clan head was just too handsome, dashing, manly, and utterly devoted to her. Chiron, exasperated, fires back that for all Cecilia's bravado, she came crawling back last year, asking her to craft a sword as a gift for her son. She shakes her head, saying she's never seen anyone as shameless. As they bicker, Theo observes with amusement, marveling at how he's never seen his mother act like this before. He realizes he never truly got to know her in his past life and reflects on how blind and ungrateful he was, too absorbed in the clan to notice the people around him. He glances at Chiron, sensing she also cares for his mother, and wonders why she didn't help in his previous life. They reach a door, and Chiron announces they've arrived at her master office. Cecilia asks why they've come so far inside and insists that Chiron better give Theo the finest sword as compensation. Chiron tells Cecilia to wait outside, grabs Theo's hand, and shuts the door, leaving her behind. Inside, Chiron's gaze sharpens on Theo, who is a bit startled. She bluntly asks him if he possesses a relic of the primordial dragon. Confused, Theo asks if she means an artifact related to the guardian dragon that protects their clan. He explains he's heard the legend of their progenitor distributing the primordial dragon's treasures across Winra for the Ragnar descendants. Growing impatient, Chiron unsheathes a blade and demands to know if he's going to keep pretending ignorance, questioning how her sword ended up in such a state if not for clashing with a relic. She emphasizes that she poured her heart and soul into forging it, and it would never break against anything but a relic. As she begins to tear up, she asks if he understands the cost and effort put into creating it. Theo apologizes, explaining that it was damaged in a battle with a drake and wondering aloud why she's mentioning a relic. Chiron sighs, saying it's easier to just show him, and pulls on a set of chains. She asks Theo what he sees behind her. He notices a coffin glowing with a blue light, the same glow he saw from the door to the dungeon in Camellia Palace. Chiron explains that she cannot see or sense anything from it herself, but based on his reaction, he clearly does. She confides that she's tried countless times to open the coffin and obtain the item within but has always failed. Then, she places it on the floor in front of him. Chiron delves into the legend of the primordial dragon's relic. In ancient times, during the Age of Myths, the primordial dragon removed one of its fangs and forged a blade from it, the legendary Moonlight Blade. She tells him that if he can break the seal on this coffin and retrieve the sword, she'll grant him the white Moonlight Blade. Theo is taken aback, and Chiron warns him that he might lose his life if he proceeds, asking if he still wants to try. Despite the danger, Theo feels a thrill and grins, declaring the sword will be his. The next scenario quest begins, to be chosen by the sword. We learn more about the White Moonlight Blade, a weapon held by the leader of the Black Snow and one of the 9 dragons, known as the Black Dragon. However, few know what the sword looks like since nearly everyone who has seen it disappeared or died. We flash back to a moment when the Black Dragon, glancing over his shoulder, asks if someone can actually see the blade, and it's none other than Theo. By sheer chance, Theo had seen the true form of the White Moonlight Blade. He wonders why the Black Dragon allowed him to live, recalling it was troublesome and he was unsure what to do. Now, back in the present, Theo finds himself puzzled as to why the sword, a relic of the primordial dragon, is here with Chiron. He realizes he met the Black Dragon 4 years later, which means the sword was with Chiron during that time. Chiron asks again if he's willing to give it a try, and Theo observes that the place resembles the Camellia Palace, noticing a keyhole on the coffin. He wonders if the blue key might work, and Chiron is surprised when he pulls it out. As Theo inserts the key and turns it, the lock begins to glow, causing the chains around the casket to snap, releasing an intense aura that even Chiron can feel. Suddenly, the energy flows from the casket and engulfs Theo. He is overwhelmed by darkness and finds his vision blurry. He wonders where he is as he sees the Rose Palace in flames, shocked to be witnessing it again. Gazing at his mother's lifeless form, he reflects that he was far too weak back then, realizing he craved more power to defeat the tyrant and crush Camellia Palace. The sword's true form manifests, attempting to take hold of Theo by feeding on his desire for strength. It tries to pierce his mind, but Theo shuts its beak firmly, challenging it. He tells the creature that trying to manipulate someone through their hunger for power is futile, especially since he already has his own quests. The creature scoffs, calling him insolent, and asks how he escaped its influence. Theo explains that he conquered that despair long ago and mocks the creature's attempts to tempt him with mere power. Surprised, the creature asks what he's talking about. Theo notes that it looks different from the griffin in his memory, as it once stood over 10 meters tall but now appears similar in size to him. He suspects that the sword's prolonged confinement has weakened it. Regardless, he sees it as an opportunity and declares he'll claim the sword by force. The griffin, taken aback, tries to reason with him, saying it's actually quite civilized. Meanwhile, Cecilia is trying to wake Theo up, tapping his face frantically and asking her mother what she did to him. Cecilia says she wanted a sword forged for her son, not for him to die. Chiron, visibly concerned, explains that the sword's energy has merged with Theo's bloodstream, something she's never seen before. She thought he'd be fine since he already possessed a relic, but now she is unsure. With tears in her eyes, Cecilia looks at her mother and vows that if anything terrible happens to Theo, she will never forgive her. As tension fills the room, Theo's grip tightens on the blade, and a dark aura swirls around him, forming a black orb that descends into his chest. Cecilia calls out to him, confused, and he finally opens his eyes. She embraces him, relieved that he's awake, and cries with joy. Theo reassures her that he's alright and that she doesn't need to worry. With the completion of his second quest, Theo now holds the White Moonlight Blade. Chiron sighs with relief, acknowledging his success in claiming the legendary sword as his own. Theo notes that he was fortunate the griffin was easy to overpower, thanks to its recent unsealing, and, of course, its attempts at psychological manipulation didn't work on him. By absorbing the sword's monstrous energy, Theo's magic power has increased significantly, giving him an additional boost of 30. With his power now surpassing 200, a faint white aura begins to emanate from him, indicating that his magic has started to gain a hint of divinity. He realizes that his magic is now on par with that of a high-ranking swordsman, though he regrets not being able to fully wield this newfound power until after the awakening ceremony. His stats are phenomenal. Chiron, visibly impressed, congratulates him on his success. Theo asks if she'll honor her promise, and Chiron reassures him that elves don't lie. Just then, he feels the sword vibrating and is puzzled. Chiron explains that it's merely resisting, not because it hasn't accepted him as its master, but rather because it feels stifled after being trapped for hundreds of years. Now, finally freed, it wants to unleash its pent-up energy. She points to a wall with sword marks on it and tells him to give it his all against it. Theo asks if it's truly safe, but Chiron laughs confidently, saying his concern is unnecessary. Even the White Moonlight Blade, she boasts, couldn't possibly harm the Basque workshop from a swing by a brat who hasn't even undergone his awakening. Theo finds her words slightly annoying and asks if she's sure, thinking this is a perfect chance to test his sword. Walking toward the wall, he wonders whether he should channel his magic, politely asking for her forgiveness. The bandages on the sword begin to unfurl, revealing its true form, and Theo's eyes darken as he imbues it with his magic, widening his stance in preparation for a powerful swing. Realizing too late what's about to happen, Chiron frantically tells him to stop, but Theo unleashes a single flash, mimicking his father's technique and completely obliterating the wall. In fact, it's not only the wall, the entire side of the Basque workshop has been sliced cleanly down the middle. Cecilia stares in shock while Chiron, now wearing a mystical mask, screams in horror about the damage to her workshop and the money she's lost. Theo, sheepishly, admits that may have been a bit too intense, as the sword drained all his magic power in one go. Suddenly, Chiron is in front of him, pressing her hand against his stomach. Theo, taken aback by her speed, realizes she's assessing him. She remarks on his lack of proficiency with magic, noting she can't detect a mana core, and asks if he achieved that cut through the blade's sheer sharpness alone. She gazes into his eyes, confirming he is indeed a genius, and realizes that this genius is her grandson. Calculating how much wealth she could earn from this prodigy, she places a hand on his shoulder and declares she will be his patron. All he has to do is show the world his skills, he'll become her workshop's greatest advertisement. Theo is surprised by her sudden interest, and even Cecilia is a bit taken aback, pointing out that she can practically see dollar signs in Chiron's eyes. That night, as Theo and his mother prepare to leave, Chiron watches them go, holding the treasures he retrieved from the dungeon to help her repair the workshop's wall. She's pleased, marveling at how her daughter has raised such an incredible son and guessing he must have acquired this loot while retrieving the relic. Laughing, she admits her pride. As they leave, a voice calls out to Chiron from above, greeting her with a long time no see. She scowls, looking up at a tree and demanding to know why this person has shown up, addressing the stranger through a bird perched there. 5 days later, it's the day of the awakening ceremony, and Theo is training with Evelyn. He's nearly pushing her back, though she manages to deflect his strikes and eventually starts pushing him back. She comments that his swordplay has become sharper and faster overall, and he notes with relief that she's complimenting him. Observing from the sidelines, the trainees are stunned. Evelyn reflects that it's been 6 months since Theo began changing, and he's already strong enough to challenge her. With his magic power awakening today, she's certain he'll soar to incredible heights and knows for sure it'll mark the birth of a true powerhouse. She smiles and praises his progress, telling him he could even aim for valedictorian at the ceremony and wishing him success. Theo laughs, crediting her training, and says that if he does win, he'll mention her in his speech. She cringes, embarrassed by the thought, and the other trainees chime in, asking him to mention them too. Theo jokes about the trouble of being popular, to which Evelyn cringes even more. With a wave, Theo bids her goodbye, mentioning he has somewhere else to be. We are taken to the central headquarters of the Ragnar family, where Theo stands before the gate and introduces himself, instructing them to open the door. A large crowd has gathered outside to witness the awakening ceremony, the most significant annual event for the Ragnars. The spectators look up as the gate swings open, and Theo enters, noting that every participant hopes to achieve favorable results at the ceremony and that becoming a swordsman of Ragnar is the first step toward recognition and honor. Inside, the venue is packed with competitors, and Theo feels a bit anxious, realizing that every member of the Ragnar clan is watching, including his father. He knows he must do his best. The 9 dragons are present as well, along with Hilda Ragnar, the former clan head from 2 generations ago. As Theo observes her, he finds it hard to believe she is 150 years old. Nonetheless, he feels relieved to see her in attendance. Suddenly, a drum beats, signaling that it is time to begin. A man, who is a judge named Vanna, calls for everyone's attention and announces that they will now proceed with the preliminary examination. This round simply involves picking up a sword placed on the ground and leaving a mark on the steel wall in front of it. The wall has been forged with a blend of white snow steel, which means that ordinary steel blades cannot scratch it. However, that changes when magic power is infused into their strikes. Vanna explains that he will distribute some to each participant. One some pill grants 10 years of magical power. It is an elixir designed to help them open their mana hall, which they must do in their abdomen. Only then will they be able to cut through the white snow steel wall with their blades. The depth of their cut will determine their results. He calls out the names of participants one by one, starting with none other than Theo. As Theo steps forward, he reflects on how, in his past life, Axion had been the valedictorian. He reaches out to take his pill and grabs one of the blades, stepping forward with determination, vowing that he won't let Axion be the star this time. His quest is to become the valedictorian of the awakening ceremony. Hilda turns to Kyle and asks if Theo is the one he mentioned in their earlier conversation. Kyle nods, acknowledging that Theo must have piqued her interest. Hilda admits that she grew curious after what he said and expresses her eagerness to see how competent this descendant of hers truly is. Theo lets out a quick sigh, starting to limber up his body, admitting he feels a bit nervous since it has been a while. Vanna instructs him to swallow the pill, and Theo responds with an okay. In his past life, swallowing the psalm had led to him losing control over his mana, severely injuring his Danon. He swallows the pill, assuring himself that he won't face the same fate this time. As the magical power swells around him, he staggers slightly. Vanna calls him an idiot, explaining that causing a mana wave of this magnitude means he will struggle to control it. When one consumes the pill, they must use it cautiously to allow the mana hall to settle in the Danon. The more talented Ragnars possess vast amounts of mana, and if they aren't careful, they risk becoming disabled. Just as it appears he is about to become crippled, the mana suddenly calms down as Theo shapes it into an orb around his body. Vanna is surprised that he has managed to endure it. Clenching his fist tightly, Theo realizes that he is now both a dragon heart and possesses a mana hall. He admits it's somewhat disheartening that he succeeded so easily compared to his last life, but from this moment on, he is officially allowed to wield mana. Using his newfound power, he prepares to leave his mark. As the mana flows around his blade, he readies his stance for a powerful swing, proclaiming that he just needs to go all out from the start. A vision of a dragon appears behind him, projecting an immense presence upon the audience. The other four hounds instantly recognize that the gap between them has widened significantly. As the aura of the dragon swings its claws forward, Theo executes a technique called single flash, leaving an enormous mark on the wall. Axion looks furious as he sees the mark on the wall. It is so deep that it can be spotted from a considerable distance, nearly cutting the wall in half. Vanna is taken aback, stuttering for a moment before announcing his past. Theo walks away with confidence, while the trainees murmur in awe, stating they have never witnessed anything like this. They refer to him as young Master Theo and question whether this is truly the sword slash of someone unleashing mana for the first time. With his reputation soaring, Theo realizes that his luck has now dropped to 0. However, he is relieved to see that his status window indicates the curse of bad luck that had been affecting him is finally over, and his fame has spread across the realm. Theo feels exhilarated, declaring that he has finally reached the same starting point as everyone else. Many people have taken notice of his remarkable performance. OSA wishes to take him on as a disciple, while Julius is enraged by the amount of attention directed toward Theo. Even someone named Rubber Ragnar is shown to be cautious of him, just like the bird Chiron had mentioned. Hilda, too, shows interest, smiling as she observes the scene. Theo reflects that, although the Black Dragon and the Sword Dragon were unexpected, he is particularly thrilled to have caught Hilda's attention. After all, she possesses the heart of Garuda, and if he can gain that, he can achieve so much more. It is now Sybil's turn, and he gives it his all with a powerful swing that leaves a mark on the wall, securing his pass. Overcome with emotion, he cries manly tears, exclaiming that he has succeeded. Hulkus, and Remington also manage to leave their marks, each one befitting of their sword techniques. However, poor Sybil realizes that while their marks were impressive, none made nearly as significant an impact as Theo's. The only participant remaining is Axion, who steps forward after his name is called. The crowd murmurs that at this rate, it seems to be a contest solely between Theo and Axion. Some even speculate that even Axion cannot compare to the performance they just witnessed, unable to believe Theo has reached such an advanced level. Angered by the chatter, Axion grabs his blade and quickly consumes his pill. As he begins to infuse his aura into his sword, Vanna tells him to wait, but it's too late. Axion unleashes a dragon-type aura reminiscent of Theo's, but it produces a terrible sound as it scrapes against the wall. Vanna exclaims that this is outrageous. He has been surprised multiple times today. Axion's attack is just as grand as Theo's, leaving an X mark on the wall. The onlookers wonder how this is possible, noting that their marks are almost identical. In this case, precision grading will determine who emerges victorious. Axion inspects his mark, looking somewhat displeased before turning away. Once everyone has had their opportunity, Vanna declares that the first stage of the ceremony is complete. He praises the participants for their hard work and expresses his satisfaction with the number of individuals who have improved their scores. Those who have passed are instructed to prepare for the second stage in 4 days, at which time he will announce the rankings that everyone has been eagerly anticipating. The crowd beams with excitement for the results as Vanna prepares to announce the valedictorian for the first stage of the awakening ceremony. Both Theo and Axion wait in anticipation to hear the results. The scene begins with a booming announcement marking the end of the first stage of the awakening ceremony and the results about to be revealed. Among the participants, Theo Ragnar and his cousin Axion stand in tense anticipation. Suddenly, Theo's name is called, and the crowd gasps in shock as Theo is declared valedictorian. He has achieved a perfect 10 out of 10 in every category, earning the nickname Flash Tiger. Whispers spread through the crowd, marveling that Theo outperformed Axion, who was deemed unbeatable. The announcer notes that Theo's sword mark is nearly identical to the legendary Thor Ragnar's, leaving everyone in awe. Meanwhile, in the snow-covered mountains, Thor Ragnar, a major figure in the clan's succession, is seen walking alone, his presence hinting at his importance. Back at the ceremony, Axion is announced as second place, his perfect score edged out by Theo's slightly longer sword mark. Axion's blazing eyes reveal his fury as the crowd falls silent, tension thick in the air. The announcer concludes by congratulating the participants and announcing that the second stage will take place in 3 days in the Winter Mountains, leaving the 87 examinees preparing for what lies ahead. Later, Theo celebrates with Remington and friends in a cozy cabin, humbly thanking them and emphasizing that the journey is far from over. Reassuring Remington, who feels ashamed of his performance, Theo brushes it off and reminds him of their friendship, reigniting his determination as they toast to the next stage. Alone in the snowy mountains, Theo reflects on his victory, knowing it isn't the end and recalling his true enemies, Axion and Skydragon. Pulling out the nest compass, Theo sees it pointing toward the Winter Mountains, realizing the second stage might reveal the nest's location. Suddenly, sensing someone behind him, Theo vanishes and reappears with his sword at the intruder's throat. The man, introducing himself as Jotun from the Gill Sword Unit, explains that his captain was impressed by Theo's performance and offers him the chance to take the entrance exam for their elite squad. Theo, still wary, questions why he must take a test if the Gill Sword Unit is so eager to recruit him. Jotun explains that merely being invited to the test is a rare privilege. Before their conversation can go further, a sharp voice cuts through the tension, addressing Jotun and his group as Sword Platoon Fools. It's the fiery vice commander of the Black Iron Cavalry, nicknamed the Fire Goblin, who wastes no time offering Theo a position in her unit, claiming her offer far outweighs anything the Gill Sword Unit can provide. Suddenly, representatives from other elite units arrive, each vying to recruit Theo into their ranks. Chaos erupts as the heated competition intensifies, with each group trying to outdo the others. Theo, growing increasingly amused, considers quietly slipping away from the escalating madness. Just as he's about to make his exit, a calm yet commanding voice echoes through the air, silencing everyone. Flower petals drift gently around as Prunus Ragnar, the lady of the Plum Blossom Palace, steps forward, her arrival stunning the crowd. She gracefully announces her interest in Theo, leaving onlookers in awe. Meanwhile, elsewhere, Axion Ragnar, consumed by rage over Theo's victory, vents his frustration in a furious rampage, striking down anyone near him. His uncle intervenes, effortlessly stopping Axion's sword with 3 fingers. Chiding Axion for his outburst, his uncle advises him to focus and leans in with a chilling promise, "Follow me, and I'll show you how to make the second stage Theo Ragnar's funeral." Back with Theo, Prunus Ragnar steps forward with confidence and elegance, commanding attention. Her presence alone leaves a powerful impression on everyone, with whispers of admiration and speculation filling the air. As some try to impede her, Prunus unleashes a surge of energy, silencing any opposition and creating a separate space for herself and Theo. Within this mystical energy, she demonstrates her sword technique, celestial flower rain, a style emphasizing grace, precision, and control, in contrast to the destructive power of Lord Kyle Ragnar. A breathtaking flurry of flower petals accompanies her moves, leaving Theo awestruck as he absorbs every detail. Prunus reassures Theo that mastering the technique immediately isn't necessary, encouraging him to reflect on its essence. With a final burst of energy, she invites Theo to seek her out after the ceremony for further lessons, leaving him both inspired and humbled by her gift. 3 days later, the scene shifts to the vast winter mountains near the northern Great Wall, an expansive, imposing range that has served as a bastion of protection for humanity against horrors beyond for over a millennium. Here, amidst this historic and treacherous landscape, the second stage of the awakening ceremony is about to begin. Jackie Ragnar, the ceremony supervisor, steps forward to address the participants, emphasizing the sacred duty of the Ragnar clan as humanity's shield against the Demon Sea, a cursed land teeming with monstrous creatures. He reminds the apprentices that they will one day shoulder this responsibility. For this test, they must remain within the Great Wall, as venturing beyond is too perilous. The objective is simple: hunt beasts, collect the bells around their necks, and survive in the harsh winter mountains for 15 days. The bells vary in color, with higher value ones indicating tougher challenges. Jackie warns of a beast so powerful it requires teamwork to defeat, hinting at significant rewards for those who succeed. Participants are allowed to use any means necessary, including stealing bells from others, in this survival of the fittest trial and embodiment of the Ragnar way. Jackie also points out totems marking safe zones where they can rest and resupply. As soon as the test begins, the participants scatter, diving into the snowy terrain. Theo's allies head into the forest to gather supplies and support him, while the red-haired siblings Hulkus and his sister charge in eagerly. Axion Ragnar, however, races through the mountains with grim determination, his uncle's chilling words echoing in his mind, "Make this Theo's grave." Watching from the shadows is Ragnar, one of the clan's 4 hounds, keeping a close eye on Axion. Meanwhile, Theo prepares to enter the forest but is stopped by Remington, who confesses that after days of reflection, he now sees Theo not only as a friend but a rival. Theo warmly accepts the challenge, admitting he feels the same, and the two part ways with newfound resolve. Alone again, Theo steadies himself, pulling out his compass to guide him to the dragon's nest. The compass lights up, pointing him through the snow-covered wilderness, and Theo's excitement builds as he sets off. Elsewhere, deep in the mountains, a mysterious blue light glimmers on a steep, snow-covered cliff, hinting at secrets waiting to be uncovered. Trudging through the snowy outskirts, Theo mutters to himself about the difficulty of following his compass in such conditions, joking that a shovel might have been more useful than his prized moon-white sword, Griffin. Gripping the hilt, the blade trembles as if alive, and Theo swings it with all his strength, releasing a surge of blue energy that clears a path and reveals a hidden trail beneath the snow. Suddenly, he senses someone watching him and calls out, daring them to reveal themselves. From behind a tree, 3 men emerge, one of them chuckling as he asks when Theo noticed them. Theo instantly recognizes the trio, Hai, Cho, and Lon, notorious as the roughnecks of the mountain. These aren't just petty thugs. In his past life, they'd left behind a massacre of over 700 innocents during their missions, a horrifying scene that Theo had once been forced to clean up. Confronting them now, Theo suspects Axion might have sent them, but they dismiss the idea, sneering that they don't take orders from someone their age. Theo presses them, and their taunts reveal the truth: they were sent by the Senate. Realizing the stakes, Theo calmly draws his sword. The leader mocks him, but in a flash, Theo's blade erupts with a blue dragon's energy, tearing through them with 3 swift, precise strikes. Blood stains the snow as their bodies collapse in a heap, their severed heads left intact as a warning. Gazing at the carnage, Theo mutters, "I don't want to be like you," before tossing their heads off the cliff. As he reflects on Lady Prunus's technique, Celestial Flower Rain, Theo acknowledges he has a long way to go before mastering it. Just then, he notices something hidden near the cliff's edge, a staircase carved into the rock, partially concealed. The system pings with a hidden quest: find the invisible staircase and explore the blue cave. Without hesitation, Theo leaps down the spiraling stairs into the mountain's depths. Meanwhile, in the monitoring room, tension rises as an announcer updates the rankings, declaring Axion Ragnar in first place, closely followed by Ragnar, as the second stage unfolds in the unforgiving winter mountains. Julius, seated at a large round table, quickly inquires about Theo's progress. The announcer hesitates before revealing that Theo has yet to score any kills or ally with anyone. Julius raises an eyebrow in surprise while the announcer speculates that Theo might be hiding or preparing an ambush. Before the conversation can continue, Prunus begins to speak, but Wolfgang interrupts with a menacing laugh, dismissing Theo's chances in the current round. He sneers, claiming that just because Theo excelled in the first round doesn't mean he'll shine here. Wolfgang goes further, mocking Theo as a coward with no real-world battle experience and even ridiculing him as an illegitimate child. Grinning maliciously, Wolfgang smugly thinks about the roughnecks he sent after Theo, confident they've already eliminated him. Sitting across from Wolfgang, Ed narrows his eyes in suspicion and telepathically asks if Wolfgang had any involvement in Theo's predicament. Wolfgang chuckles, admitting he didn't bother to inform Ed of his plans. Frustrated, Ed clenches his jaw, inwardly fuming at Wolfgang's recklessness. Ever since Theo took control of the Camellia Palace, Ed and his allies were forced to relocate to the Rose Palace, which gave Ed the opportunity to search for the ancient dragon artifact. Despite his efforts, he hasn't found it and now suspects Theo holds the key. Determined, Ed gives a silent telepathic order to his subordinate to find Axion and urge him to accelerate the plan to eliminate Theo. Meanwhile, Prunus warns Julius that the Senate must be plotting something and suggests implementing a backup plan. Julius dismisses her concerns, confident in Theo's resilience. He believes Theo is likely biding his time and adds, with a smirk, that he hasn't forgotten Prunus met Theo behind his back. Prunus brushes off the remark with a laugh, stating that what truly matters is Theo's perspective. Meanwhile, Theo has entered a dark cave filled with skeletal remains, bones and skulls scattered across the ground. As he ventures deeper, the skeletons seem to come alive, letting out eerie roars meant to unsettle him, but Theo's mental fortitude renders him unfazed. Placing a hand on the cold wall, he activates his sensory perception skill, sending a surge of awareness through the cave and mapping out the paths ahead. His lips curl into a smirk as he detects a glowing path. This must be the hatchling's nest. A memory from his past life surfaces, he recalls Huel discovering a legendary item in this cave years later. Determined to claim the prize first, Theo follows the path to a massive, ancient door. Standing before it, he feels a slight pang of pity for Huel, knowing he's about to claim the treasure long before Huel ever has the chance. As he steps closer, the door seems to awaken, and Theo senses a presence behind it. Then he sees it, a massive eye, wide open, staring at him from the darkness. Dumbfounded, Theo pushes the door open, stepping into a vast, fantastical chamber. Before him lies a hoard of glittering gold, rare swords, and treasures from across the world. Yet, instead of excitement, Theo feels unease. This isn't the hatchling's nest he anticipated, it's something far greater. This is the lair of the ancient dragon. A bead of sweat rolls down his face as he grasps the magnitude of the situation. Challenging a dragon of this caliber is unthinkable. Survival alone would be a miracle. Scanning the treasure, Theo wonders if he arrived years too early or if Huel's intel had been wrong. Deciding to retreat, he turns to leave, but an intense gaze freezes him in place. Slowly, he turns back to see a massive, gleaming golden eye locked onto him. The dragon awakens, its voice resonating through the cavern with ancient authority. "You are the first selector in a very long time," it says. The dragon, lounging atop the treasure, watches Theo intently. Overwhelmed by the honor, Theo drops to his knees, bowing deeply, and greets the dragon as his ancestor. The dragon, amused, tilts its head at the term ancestor. Theo hurriedly explains, recalling his clan's history. Wasn't the guardian dragon the lifelong companion of Sigurd, the Ragnar clan's great progenitor? Wasn't it also the mother of the famed dragon that birthed their bloodline? The dragon snorts in what sounds like amusement, its voice laced with sarcasm as it clarifies the myths. That bastard Sigurd spread quite the tale, it says. While it's true Sigurd and the dragon shared a bond of mutual respect, there was no familial lineage or romantic connection. Their relationship was forged through a deep, sacred pact, not blood. After all, the dragon adds with a sly grin, a human and a dragon? Hardly a compatible mix. Theo feels his cheeks flush at the implication, but he presses forward, asking if all the Ragnar family's talk about carrying the dragon's blood is just exaggerated propaganda. Roadbroke nods, confirming that while the claim is largely mythical, it isn't entirely false. The contract with Sigurd did leave traces of the dragon's power, but only in a symbolic sense. Feeling more at ease, Theo recognizes the rare opportunity before him. This isn't about fighting, but about learning invaluable truths that could aid him in his climb to the top of the Ragnar clan. Sensing Theo's anticipation, Rodbrok sighs and explains that, as the guardian dragon, it is bound by an ancient pact. Any worthy selector who passes its test earns the right to ask 3 questions. The scene shifts to Axion Ragnar, who is busy taking down a ferocious beast with a technique known as Thousand Dragons Roar. In one devastating strike, he brings down a tiger-like creature, which collapses at his feet. He smirks as he picks up a small green bell from the beast's neck, muttering that this makes his 57th. Tossing the bell to a subordinate, he asks if there's been any news about Theo. Orion, a loyal member of Axion's group, reports that they still haven't tracked Theo's location. Orion can't help but admire Axion's incredible strength, thinking about how easily his leader dispatches creatures others would avoid. But his admiration gets the better of him as he mutters something about Theo's intelligence. Axion's expression darkens, and before Orion can react, Axion grabs him by the throat, lifting him effortlessly. With a deadly glare, Axion growls that true strength is fearless. Orion, gasping for air, stammers out an apology. Just then, another messenger arrives with news that the Central Intelligence Bureau has ordered them to hasten their mission. Axion releases Orion, still radiating menace, and brushes off the message, telling the messenger to inform the Bureau that no one is more eager for Theo's death than he is. His body seems to hum with unrestrained bloodlust, leaving his intentions unmistakable. We return to Theo, who is deep in thought, carefully considering how to frame his 3 questions for Rodbrok. He knows each one must count. After a moment, he takes a steadying breath and asks the first question, one that's been on his mind: why are you here? Rodbrok's eye gleams with approval at the question. A good start, it remarks with a chuckle. The dragon explains that far beyond the edges of the known world exists a being called the Nameless Monarch, a monster of unfathomable power. For thousands of years, it has been Rodbrok's mission to shield the world from this threat. Winter Mountain, grand as it is, serves merely as an outpost in a far greater conflict. Theo feels a chill as he realizes that even this ancient, powerful dragon harbors fear of the Nameless Monarch. Pushing aside his unease, he asks his second question: what is the ancient dragon's relic? Rodbrok, impressed by Theo's curiosity, explains that there are 3 relics tied to its soul, each a powerful artifact. But with a mysterious glint, the dragon reveals that Theo already possesses 2 of them. Shocked, Theo quickly recalls the dungeon in the Camellia Palace and his moonwhite sword, Griffin, but wonders about the 3rd relic. Rodbrok identifies it as paper, a result of the dragon's soul being split into 31 fragments, each given to humans to aid in defending against the Nameless Monarch. These relics, Rodbrok explains, can take many forms: an item, a weapon, or even an event. Theo's mind races as he connects the dots to his miraculous return to the past. Could his regression, a phenomenon he once thought impossible, have been caused by a relic? The revelation leaves him stunned, forcing him to rethink his entire journey. Gathering his courage, Theo asks his 3rd and final question: why was I chosen? Inwardly, he wonders why someone like him, who was once talentless, would be deemed worthy of facing the Nameless Monarch over others far stronger or more gifted. Rodbrok meets his gaze with a knowing look and counters with its own question: why do you think you're the only one chosen? Theo's eyes widen in shock as the implication sinks in. Others must have been selected by relics as well. His mind races to figures like Ed and even the Black Dragon. Did they know about the relics? Could they have experienced regression, too? The weight of the dragon's answer leaves Theo reeling, filling him with both clarity and more questions. A terrifying Nameless Monarch, an ancient dragon bound by duty, and the possibility of other regressors, the enormity of it all settles on his shoulders. Breaking the silence, Rodbrok declares that Theo's 3 questions have been answered and that the hidden quest is now complete. As per their covenant, Theo is entitled to a reward. A system notification appears, congratulating him on completing the quest and offering him a treasure. Rodbrok gestures to the vast trove surrounding them, inviting Theo to choose whatever he desires: gems, relics, elixirs, skill books, or armaments, each beyond ordinary imagination. Scanning the treasures, Theo feels a spark of boldness and surprises even himself as he smiles and declares, "I want you." Roadbroke freezes, visibly stunned, utterly bewildered by Theo's unexpected request. Roadbroke lets out a booming laugh, remarking, "It seems my popularity is truly eternal," and calling Theo's claim an amusing jest. However, her tone sharpens as she asks what he genuinely desires. Theo remains silent for a moment, then cryptically hints at something about her standing atop the treasure. Confused and increasingly irritated, Roadbroke narrows her eyes and demands, "That wasn't a joke, was it?" With unshaken confidence, Theo confirms her suspicion. Spreading her massive wings, Roadbroke generates a powerful gust, the sheer force nearly toppling Theo as it drives him back. Radiating an overwhelming aura of dragon fear, she demands, "Are you seriously trying to claim all my treasure and my knowledge with clever wordplay?" Theo braces himself against the oppressive force, his thoughts racing as he realizes the full weight of the guardian dragon's aura pressing down on him. Determined to withstand it, he grits his teeth, blood trickling from his eyes and mouth as he fights to stay upright. Summoning Lesser Drake's fear, a blue, smoke-like energy begins to emanate from him. Roadbroke sneers at his attempt. "How foolish," she mocks. "Do you think you can stand against me with such a minor fear?" Yet Theo remains resolute, defiantly declaring that the guardian dragon had promised he could claim any treasure within her nest, without any limitations. He boldly suggests that she herself, as the heart of this hoard, could be considered a treasure. Knowing he's gambling with his life, Theo clenches his jaw and resolves to press forward. He understands that Roadbroke, the legendary guardian dragon who had once forged a pact with Sigurd, the Ragnar clan's progenitor, represents an unparalleled claim to legitimacy. Summoning every ounce of his will, he declares that he will not let this opportunity slip through his fingers. Blood continues to drip as he demands that she honor her promise, choosing her as his prize and asking her to stand by his side. Roadbroke, watching Theo endure her overwhelming aura with unflinching resolve, feels a strange familiarity, a reminder of Sigurd's unwavering determination centuries ago. Slowly, she exhales, her fiery gaze softening. "Very well," she says, her voice carrying both amusement and nostalgia. "I accept your request." Theo, stunned by her words, takes a moment to process them. As her enormous form begins to transform, her dragon body is enveloped in a thick fog, and her golden eyes glow with an ancient, otherworldly light. When the fog fades, a humanoid figure emerges from the treasure, stepping into view. The mist clears entirely to reveal a breathtakingly beautiful woman. Horns curl gracefully from her head, her eyes shimmer with a golden hue, and an aura of ancient majesty radiates from her. Taking a few steps closer, she chuckles at Theo's awestruck gaze. "You seem captivated by my beauty," she teases. Then, with a somber tone, she reveals that she is over 2,000 years old and has suffered the loss of her heart 50 years prior. Her time, she explains, is short. She has only 3 years left to live due to her condition and is bound to her nest, unable to leave. Extending a hand toward him, she asks, "Do you still wish to choose me as your reward, even knowing this?" Theo smiles, his resolve unwavering. "My answer remains the same," he replies firmly. "I choose you, Roadbroke." A system notification appears, confirming that Theo has selected Ragnar's guardian dragon, Roadbroke, as his reward. Roadbroke shakes her head, half amused, half resigned. "You're a fool," she says, though her tone carries a hint of approval. "But such stubbornness is fitting for a chosen one." The system window updates, granting Theo 2 new titles, Guardian Dragon's Significant Other and Descendant of the Progenitor. Theo, bloodied yet triumphant, stands with fierce determination as Roadbroke gazes at him, her expression unreadable. Theo vows to grow stronger in search for more relics of the primordial dragon, determined to find something that can substitute for Roadbroke's lost heart. A system notification appears, indicating that a soul link has been established between him and the guardian dragon. Eyes filled with resolve, Theo assures Roadbroke that he will uncover a relic capable of fulfilling the role of her heart. Another system message informs him that he has gained a significant amount of experience points, resulting in a level up. With newfound determination, Theo declares, "I must at least accomplish this to be worthy of the title Guardian Dragon's Significant Other." Roadbroke smirks and instructs him to care for her in his new role as her chosen partner. However, she warns that since she cannot leave her nest until a solution is found, she will soon enter hibernation. Before doing so, she produces a glowing blue book and, in an instant, appears directly before him. Pressing the book against his chest, she explains that reading it will awaken his mind gate, enabling him to form a true soul link with her. She gestures around the cave, informing him that food is available near the nest and encouraging him to take his time studying. A system notification appears, announcing that Theo has acquired the Grimoire of Aman. Stunned, Theo stares at the book in his hands as the system elaborates. The Grimoire of Aman is a mystical tome containing principles tied to the sound that resonated at the dawn of creation, a holy resonance embodying the universal truths of existence. Marveling at his fortune, Theo asks Roadbrook about the timeline for awakening his mind gate. She clarifies that the initial awakening process takes roughly a month. Theo's expression shifts as the weight of her words sinks in. He recalls the urgency of his current situation. The second stage of the awakening ceremony is underway, and he has only 15 days left to complete the exam. Anxiously, he asks if he can return to her nest after finishing the trial. With a teasing yet authoritative tone, Roadbrook perches on one of the treasure chests, her golden eyes gleaming. "I won't permit you to leave until you open your mind gate," she declares. Theo freezes, realizing she's serious. The pressure mounts as he calculates the time he has left, just 13 days to accomplish what others would need a month for, all while his competitors are out gathering bells and battling to secure their positions. 3 days prior to the commencement of the second stage, snow carpeted the grounds of the Central Intelligence Bureau. The chill in the atmosphere wasn't solely from the freezing weather but from Axion's uncle, whose malicious grin hinted at something far more sinister than frost. Axion stood stiffly as his uncle rifled through a container, eventually pulling out what appeared to be an innocent marble. But in this world, nothing was truly innocent. With the theatrical flair of a villain delivering a dramatic soliloquy, his uncle elaborated on the marble's purpose. It enhanced the energy of fiends trapped within, creating an anti-field safety zone to repel other fiends. Then, to demonstrate its power, he shattered the marble, releasing a swirling haze of purple and black motes. The disturbance condensed into a hideous, four-eyed creature with a maw wide enough to swallow Axion whole. Before Axion could fully process the situation, shadows surged from his uncle's feet, taking the form of a dragon that obliterated the fiend in a single devastating strike. The spectacle left Axion torn between admiration and disbelief at the monstrous legacy he seemed to have inherited. Unfazed by Axion's inner turmoil, his uncle continued detailing the next step of their scheme. The objective of the second stage was straightforward: exterminate fiends and amass points. However, Axion's mission was far more specific and vindictive. His task was to lure Theo out using the marbles. Axion, never one to embrace subtlety, suggested torturing Theo first to wring out every shred of information about the Rose Palace relic. His uncle, the ever-pragmatic voice of reason, reminded him that Theo wasn't someone to be underestimated. "Restraint has never been your forte," he chided, earning a murderous glare from Axion, whose clenched fists cracked audibly. Instead, they would exploit Theo's emotional vulnerability, targeting his treasured followers from Training Ground 4. Fast forward to the present, and Axion's plan was unraveling. Theo hadn't risen to the bait. Instead of participating in fiend hunting like a conventional contender, Theo had opted for a Where's Waldo approach, remaining elusive. With only 12 hours left on the clock, Axion brooded in growing irritation, his rank of 860 points doing little to soothe his temper. Behind him, pulsating lights announced the arrival of Felix Ragnar, a swordsman from Plum Blossom Palace and currently ranked 7th with 446 points. Felix, ever the self-proclaimed investigator, suggested Theo might have been apprehended by the council scoundrels. Axion's retort was cutting, a frigid, soul-piercing glare followed by a sneering jab: "Your deductions are as pathetic as your rank." To twist the knife further, Axion ridiculed Felix's association with Lady Plum Blossom. Felix's jaw tightened, his hands quivered slightly, but he wisely restrained himself, unwilling to retaliate. Axion dismissed him with a wave, declaring it was time to drag Theo out of hiding. Gathering members of the Scaled Dragon Society in Plum Blossom Palace, Axion laid out a plan to systematically hunt down Theo's companions. The Scaled Dragon members grinned maliciously, relishing the prospect. Unknown to Axion, an eavesdropper lurked nearby. Concealed behind a tree, Ragnar, ranked 3rd with 561 points, listened intently. In the shadowy, echoing forest, the agonized shriek of a dying forest lizard reverberated. A band of hunters stood triumphantly over its carcass, the rancid odor of blood mingling with the earthy scent of damp moss. This wasn't just any forest lizard but a mid-tier fiend. The hunters, however, basked in their own inflated sense of accomplishment. Among them was Sybil, ranked 68th with a paltry 31 points, barely managing to escape the realm of participation awards. He clutched a yellow demon bell, a keepsake from an earlier triumph over a fiend that had somehow been even less formidable than their current prey. His comrades, Gordon, ranked 53rd with 52 points, and Romero, ranked 62nd with 36 points, shared in his self-satisfaction, equally thrilled by their modest triumphs. If points were currency, Sybil and his crew would still be destitute, but at least they were breathing. Sybil held up the yellow demon bell, a lackluster emblem of mediocrity, and grumbled, 12 hours left, where's Theo? His tone carried less worry for Theo's well-being and more irritation over their meticulously saved supplies now feeling like wasted effort. The group's self-proclaimed strategist speculated with a blend of respect and cynicism, Theo's probably orchestrating something big. He's not like us, scrounging for points just to scrape by. The resident optimist added with a spark of excitement, what if he takes the top spot again? His glee earned a round of annoyed glances. Without warning, Ragnar, ranked 14th with a formidable 173 points, drove his blade through Sybil's back. The gruesome crunch of steel-piercing flesh echoed sharply, and Sybil's victorious grin contorted into a mask of shock as blood darkened his clothes. Orion yanked his sword free with a flourish. You're nothing more than fodder, he said icily, his disdain as cutting as his blade. His frosty stare locked onto the others, daring them to act. As he raised his sword again, chaos erupted. Meanwhile, as if destiny couldn't resist checking in on its chosen protagonist, the scene shifted to Theo. Deep within Lord Brock's nest, Theo stood in the ominous presence of the ancient dragon herself. The beast's glowing amber eyes studied him with an unnerving blend of curiosity and appraisal. Her voice, a resonant rumble akin to rolling thunder, filled the cavern as she scrutinized his progress with the Mind Gate, a feat he had achieved in under a month, a timeline so extraordinary it could crush the spirits of even the most gifted. A system notification flashed before Theo, proclaiming his partial mastery of the Grimoire of Amon, magical principles partially understood. Theo smirked, muttering with wry amusement, that's my life, always the overachieving B+ in a world that demands an A++. The Grimoire, a notorious relic veiled in mystery, demanded not only immense mana but also the heart of a dragon to unravel its profound secrets. Luckily, Theo had both the mana and the dragon's heart, enabling him to advance at twice the pace of the average overburdened sorcerer. Yet, as always, the system, ever ready to crush his momentary sense of accomplishment, informed him that his stats were still subpar, granting him a skill called hatching. The ability wasn't entirely worthless, it allowed him to manipulate lingering thoughts through psychokinesis. Sure, it sounded impressive on paper, but Theo had been hoping for something far more dramatic, like conjuring infernos or bending reality itself. Lord Brock, unimpressed by his grumbling, closed her enormous eyes and remarked bluntly, "You've barely qualified to call yourself my consort." Theo blinked, dumbfounded. Consort? What kind of twisted partnership terms was this dragon operating under? Before he could respond, she continued, "You'll need rigorous training to master advanced skills. And don't forget, I've only got 2 years left. Prioritize my restoration, or we're both doomed." Her matter-of-fact tone only bolstered Theo's resolve. Flashing a determined grin, he replied, "Don't worry. I'll fix this. You're stuck with me now." Satisfied with his conviction, Lord Brock began the primordial covenant. Wisps of smoke coiled around Theo as her molten gold eyes burned brighter than ever. "You're my consort, the first in a millennium," she intoned, her voice laden with ancient authority. In a blink, she disappeared, teleporting Theo to a snow-covered mountain cliff. Standing amidst the expansive, frost-bitten wilderness, Theo exhaled a frosty sigh, his breath mingling with the biting cold. His gaze swept over the barren landscape as if willing it to offer him a lifeline. 12 hours, just 12 scant hours remained, and what did he have to show for it? A towering pile of regrets and an awakening ceremony that seemed about as useful as trying to teach a fish to climb a ladder. "This is going nowhere," he grumbled, kicking at the snow with the irritation of someone realizing they'd been playing in the wrong league all along. Hunting fiends? What a joke! It was nothing more than a glorified scavenger hunt compared to the level of skill he needed. First place wasn't just slipping through his grasp, it was sprinting away at lightning speed. Then, inspiration struck, a dim, flickering idea, but an idea nonetheless. In his prior life, Axion had claimed the top rank during the awakening ceremony. If he wanted to take that title, he needed to abandon the Boy Scout routine of scavenging fiend tokens. No, it was time to target the real prizes, other participants' bells. But just as his determination solidified into a plan, a darker thought loomed in the back of his mind like an ominous thundercloud. The name itself left a sour taste on his tongue. That guy wasn't merely tough, defeating him wasn't just challenging, it bordered on outright lunacy. The thought lingered, heavy and suffocating, casting a shadow over his freshly devised plan. Before his spiraling doubt could take hold, a faint rustling broke the oppressive silence. Theo's head snapped toward the noise, his heartbeat quickening. A figure stumbled into view, their steps uneven, leaving a grisly trail of blood across the pristine snow. Then it came, a voice, soft yet chilling, slicing through the frigid air like a dagger. Theo froze, his muscles locking as if his blood had turned to ice. His gaze darted between the stumbling figure and the dark presence that accompanied it. Yet, it wasn't the staggering person ahead that unsettled him, it was the other entity lurking just beyond sight. A thick blanket of snow muffled all sound, cloaking the forest in an uncanny silence. Theo stood amidst the towering trees, every nerve alert, his eyes scanning for any trace of movement. His vigilance was rewarded when he spotted a figure stumbling toward him. "Ray," he called, his voice tinged with both surprise and concern. Ragnar, the warrior celebrated for her indomitable strength, appeared almost unrecognizable. Her shoulders drooped under an invisible weight, and her steps faltered as though her body could barely support her. Her face, typically a portrait of determination, was ashen and lined with exhaustion. As she approached, Theo noticed a subtle quiver in her hands and a sheen of sweat glistening on her brow despite the biting chill. "Ray, what happened to you?" Theo hurried to her side, his gaze quickly scanning for injuries. "Were you attacked by beasts?" Ray didn't reply immediately, her breathing shallow and ragged, her trembling hand clutching the hilt of her sword with desperation. Theo's sharp eyes caught the dark stain spreading across her side, a fresh wound, raw and jagged. A cold knot formed in his stomach. "This wasn't the work of a monster," he muttered, his tone heavy with apprehension. "Ray, did someone ambush you?" Ray attempted to steady herself, but her knees buckled. Theo moved swiftly, his strong arms catching her before she collapsed completely. "You need to rest," he urged, his voice firm yet filled with compassion. "Tell me everything later." Ray shook her head weakly, her voice strained and barely audible. "Go west, now," she rasped, her urgency palpable, even as her body betrayed her exhaustion. As Theo eased her to the ground, her grip on her sword slackened, and the blade slipped from her grasp. Reacting instinctively, Theo caught the weapon. The instant his hand closed around the hilt, a brilliant flash of light engulfed him. System notification, hatchling synchronization initiated. Accessing memories within the sword. Reading the thoughts of its owner, Ragnar. Theo's vision blurred and twisted, pulling him into a vivid recollection. The scene around him transformed, and he found himself in a secluded part of the forest. Concealed within the shadows of towering trees, he saw Ragnar crouched behind a colossal trunk, her piercing gaze fixed on a group gathered a short distance away. In the center of the clearing stood Axion, his imposing presence dominating the space. Around him, Theo's comrades were bound and bloodied, their faces swollen and battered from relentless abuse. Axion's subordinates loomed over them like predators, their weapons gleaming menacingly in the pale light. "No trace of Theo yet," one of Axion's men reported gruffly. "But we've left enough tracks to lure him here." Another henchman snickered darkly. "We even let monsters roam the area. If Theo's alive, he'll come." Axion's icy, calculating eyes remained fixed on the hostages. His expression was unreadable, cold as stone, as though he was already several steps ahead in this cruel game. After a prolonged silence, Axion finally spoke, his voice cold and deliberate. "Should I execute them? Why bring so many? 2 or 3 would have sufficed." One of his subordinates shrugged nonchalantly, raising his blade. "Then why not dispose of a few? It'll make the message clear." The blade shimmered menacingly in the dim light as it descended swiftly, promising death. Just as it was about to strike, a resolute voice cut through the tension. "Stop this." Ray emerged from the shadows, her sword unsheathed, her stance defiant. Axion turned toward her, his brow furrowing with a mix of irritation and surprise.
Ragnar? What brings you here? This doesn't concern you.
They're Theo's companions, Ray said, her tone firm as steel and her fingers tightening around the hilt of her weapon.
Release them.
A smirk played on Axion's lips, his tone dripping with mockery.
So, you've sided with Theo too, have you?
Ray offered no verbal response. Instead, she charged, her blade flashing as it carved through the air. Axion met her head-on, his sword drawn in a fluid, practiced motion. Sparks erupted as their weapons clashed, the metallic screech echoing through the clearing.
Ray attacked with unwavering determination, her strikes relentless, but Axion's skill and sheer power were formidable.
With a crushing blow, he sent her sprawling to the ground. She attempted to rise, her body trembling with exertion, but her strength was fading rapidly. The memory dissolved like mist, and Theo found himself back in the present. Ray leaned heavily against him, her breath shallow and labored.
Theo's mind reeled as he processed the vivid memory. Ray, he began, his voice taut and brimming with tension, why did Axion take my comrades? What's his objective?
Ray hesitated, guilt shadowing her features. He was desperate to find you, she admitted softly. When you didn't appear, he seized your friends to force you out of hiding. Theo's fists clenched tightly, his nails biting into his palms as anger, guilt, and determination churned within him like a storm.
Where are they?
He demanded, his voice sharp and unyielding.
Where is Axion?
You can't go, Ray whispered, her voice fragile and strained.
The Central Intelligence Bureau's supervisors are backing him. Not even you can handle them all. Theo's jaw tightened, his resolve like iron. I don't care.
Every moment we stand here, they're in danger.
This isn't just a trial anymore.
Ray shouted, her voice breaking under the weight of her emotions. It's a carefully laid trap to eliminate you. We need to regroup, rally support, and strategize.
There's no time,
Theo barked, urgency blazing in his voice. I won't stand by and let them perish. Ray's frustration boiled over, her voice trembling as she countered, even if it means sacrifices, I can't bear to lose anyone else. Theo's voice exploded, reverberating through the hushed forest.
I've already lost more than I can bear. Not again.
Meanwhile, in a secluded grove, Axion stood surrounded by Theo's captured allies. The once pristine snow beneath them was tainted with streaks of crimson, evidence of a fierce and ruthless struggle. A subordinate approached cautiously, bowing slightly before speaking.
Sir, Theo has been sighted. He's at the northern cliffs, currently in communication with Ragnar. A wicked smirk spread across Axion's lips. Finally, Theo Ragnar. I'll make you understand the price of defying me.
A guttural, raspy voice resonated in his ear, audible only to him. Remember, young Master Axion, there's no need to confront him head-on.
Extract the information about the relics, we'll handle Theo ourselves. Axion's expression grew darker, and he inclined his head slightly. Understood, but I intend to make him suffer first. The voice continued coldly, use the summoning orb to divert the supervisor's attention.
Meanwhile, with Theo, Ray made a final, desperate plea to deter him.
Theo, please, don't do this. You're walking straight into their ambush. Theo's resolve didn't falter for a moment.
Thank you for warning me, Ray, he replied, his tone unwavering, but I refuse to stand by while my comrades are in peril. As Ray was not ready to answer Theo, he pleaded her to tell their location, as memories of the time spent with his subordinates flashed through his mind. Hero's palace fell in his previous life and he couldn't do anything but watch as he was weak. With resolve and power this time he tells her that she also interfered, so Theo cannot just stand by and watch his subordinates die in front of his eyes. The air around Theo grew dense, charged with an unmistakable energy.
A faint, dragon-like aura flickered behind him, embodying the sheer force of his determination.
Ray's eyes widened, her breath catching as she felt the weight of his presence bear down on her.
Where is Axion? Theo demanded, his voice steady yet authoritative, his gaze unrelenting.
Elsewhere, deep within another part of the forest, three figures stumbled across a grim and disconcerting scene. Supplies lay scattered across the snow, and faint streaks of blood trailed away from the area. One of them, Remington, ranked second in the competition, knelt to inspect a blood-stained box. His expression grew somber as he spoke.
These provisions, they belong to Theo's team.
Behind him loomed Hulkus, a towering figure ranked 5th, and Eric's, who held the 4th rank. Both scanned the area, their faces etched with unease.
"This doesn't look promising," Remington remarked grimly.
He turned to his companions, his voice resolute. "We need to find them before it's too late. I'll need both of you to back me up." Chaos erupted as Theo faced a gargantuan white creature, its absurdly massive weapon poised to pulverize him. "Perfect," Theo muttered sardonically, evading at the final instant as the ground shattered under the beast's colossal blow. Unperturbed, he tightened his hold on the blade. "Just a giant, ill-mannered brute with no respect for boundaries," he quipped before lunging forward with surgical precision, targeting the creature's vulnerabilities. The beast collapsed with a guttural wail, but Theo spared it no glance, already forging ahead, his thoughts fixed on his imprisoned friends. As if fate conspired against him, 5 identical monstrosities emerged, their glowing crimson eyes radiating menace.
"What is this? Axion's discount monster factory?" Theo snapped.
Drawing upon the dragon's 3rd claw, he unleashed a cataclysmic sword strike, annihilating the pack in one sweeping motion.
"Efficiency," he muttered, stepping over the wreckage, though triumph was fleeting. The ultimate adversary appeared a colossal abomination dwarfing its predecessors. Its very presence seemed to mock Theo's readiness.
"Massive, but I've seen worse, mostly my own poor decisions," he sneered. As the beast bellowed, Theo launched himself skyward, descending like an avenging meteor, his blade embedding deep into its skull, silencing it instantly. The tumult faded, transitioning to Ray, who lingered in the eerie quiet of Theo's departure. Memories flooded in young Theo, grasping her hand, courage blazing in his small frame. "Always so reckless," she whispered, frustration and nostalgia mingling.
Resolving not to stay idle, she clenched her fists.
"Go on, play the hero, but don't think I'll let you have all the glory." With a determined stride, she vanished into the forest. Meanwhile, in Axion's lair, Theo's captured companions, brimming with fury, strained against their bonds.
One, channeling fiery defiance, yelled, "You'll regret this, Axion." Predictably, the flamboyant villain responded with a mix of disdain and gratuitous cruelty.
Axion's boot slams into the captive's face, forcing him to the ground as a derisive smirk spreads across his lips. "Such clamor," he sneers. Ever the performer, Axion draws his blade, the steel glinting menacingly as he levels it against the man's throat. Before he can escalate further, a velvety voice slithers from the shadows. "Young Master Axion," it murmurs, laced with condescension. "Recall the Bureau's directives.
Any reckless action could jeopardize the operation."
Axion growls, his jaw tightening as he begrudgingly sheathes the sword. Refusing to squander a chance for theatrics, he seats himself atop the captive's back as though it were a mockery of a throne. "Comfortable enough," he mutters, his crimson eyes blazing with barely restrained rage. A flicker of light through the trees catches his attention, sharpening his gaze.
"Ah, how charming," he remarks, voice dripping with sarcasm.
"The Bureau decided to send 4 elite prosecutors to assist me because evidently, my uncles believe I'm incapable of dealing with one lowborn offspring alone."
Fools! His fingers tighten into fists, the tension in his knuckles betraying his simmering pride and seething resentment.
The atmosphere shifts as Theo steps into the clearing, an aura of restrained power enveloping him. Every eye snaps to him, from his bruised comrades to Axion's minions, even the trees seeming to lean in, drawn by the palpable intensity. Axion rises slowly, feigned indifference masking his irritation. "So," he drawls, "you've finally graced us with your presence, Theo Ragnar." Theo doesn't respond with words, his eyes scanning the scene with cold calculation. Comrades to the left, guards to the right, and the arrogant would-be tyrant at the center. His grip on the sword tightens, the air humming with his subdued fury. "You kept me waiting," Axion taunts, his tone like a serrated blade. Theo's gaze locks onto the captive beneath Axion's boot, his deliberate strides cutting through the tension. Sensing the shift, Axion's hand drifts to his weapon, but before he can act, the irksome, composed voice from the shadows cuts in once more.
"Young Master Axion, do not let him provoke you." Axion exhales sharply, forcing himself to regain a semblance of composure.
"Theo," he begins, adopting an air of authority, "let's abandon the theatrics."
"Surely you understand the Are you frightened?"
Theo interrupts, his voice as sharp as a blade.
Axion's smirk falters. "What?"
Theo steps forward, his tone cold and merciless. Are you afraid you'll be defeated by me? The barb hits its mark, and cracks appear in Axion's facade as fury bubbles beneath. How dare you? Because if you weren't scared, Theo presses, a smirk creeping onto his face, you wouldn't need this charade, hostages, guards, the entire spectacle. Tell me, Axion, what has you so terrified? Axion's jaw clenches, his fists trembling with suppressed rage. You insufferable wretch, he hisses, but Theo is unrelenting. Prove me wrong, he challenges, raising his blade and pointing it at Axion. Face me, like a true Ragnar, unless, of course, you've already discarded your pride. The clearing grows deathly still, holding its breath as Axion's fury erupts. He releases a venomous laugh, his voice dripping with malice. You believe you, a concubine's whelp, can challenge me? Absurd. Ignoring the increasingly frantic warnings from the unseen speaker, Axion unsheathes his sword, his grin twisted by wrath. Fine, if it's a duel you seek, then let's finish this once and for all. Perched high above the chaos, nestled in the treetops like overly dramatic crows, a squad of covert operatives observed the escalating spectacle. Cloaked in shadow and armed with expressions of grave importance, they exchanged hushed remarks. This is spiraling out of control, one muttered, peering through a pair of binoculars. Stick to the strategy, another replied tersely, their tone heavy with the distinct air of we should have had lunch first. If Axion loses his grip, we step in. Meanwhile, back on the battlefield, Axion, the perennial master of theatrics, addressed his followers with the gravity of someone announcing the end of days. No one interferes, he declared, his voice booming with self-importance. This is a duel of Ragnar honor. He gestured grandly toward Theo as though unveiling a prized gladiator. The captives remain unharmed until this concludes, he added, because evidently, nothing screamed honor quite like keeping your opponents tied up. Theo, ever opportunistic, launched his assault before Axion could finish his self-obsessed speech. One moment Axion stood poised, the epitome of control, the next, he was scrambling to parry a strike so swift it bordered on insulting. Axion faltered, his thoughts racing to catch up with reality. Theo smirked, his blade catching the light with an almost vindictive glint. Quit stalling, fight me for real, he challenged, his tone a perfect blend of mockery and provocation. Infuriated, Axion decided it was time to unleash his ace. Fine, he bellowed, channeling his ultimate technique, Thousand Dragons Roar. From his blade erupted a colossal, blazing red dragon, its fiery maw snapping with a ferocity that would send most fleeing or praying. For a heartbeat, Theo froze, his eyes widening at the sheer magnitude of the assault, blinking at the inferno barreling toward him. So this is your idea of fair play? Good to know. But Theo wasn't one to remain idle for long. Summoning his glowing blue sword, its radiance bordering on obnoxious, he steadied himself. With a single, devastating sweep, he unleashed the dragon's third claw, meeting Axion's fiery monstrosity head-on. The resulting collision was blinding, and when the light faded, the red dragon was gone, reduced to a disgruntled wisp of smoke. Axion gaped, disbelief etched into his features, his jaw practically unhinged. Theo, by contrast, stood calm and collected, brushing off non-existent dust as though nullifying apocalyptic attacks was an everyday chore. His smirk widened, exuding a confidence sharp enough to cut. Are you even competent enough to teach me anything, Axion? He quipped, his voice laced with the kind of smugness that made Axion's blood boil. The scene starts with Orion Gardner, ranked 14 with 179 points and an executive of the Scale Dragon Society. As Theo effortlessly countered Axion's Thousand Dragon Roar, Orion's usual composure broke. Unbelievable, he muttered, his voice laced with disbelief and a touch of dread. This was not how the day was supposed to go. For weeks, Orion had dismissed Theo as a minor obstacle someone Axion could crush without much effort. But now, here was Theo, calm, precise, effortlessly dismantling Axion's flashy attacks as if swatting a fly. This is bad, Orion thought, his fingers twitching as if he was on the verge of making a foolish decision. The reality of Theo's overwhelming strength raised uncomfortable questions in his mind, chief among them, am I backing the wrong side? For a fleeting moment, the idea of betrayal crossed Orion's mind. What if he switched sides? Theo was clearly capable, his group well organized, and they seemed far less likely to implode from overconfidence. But just as quickly, Orion dismissed the thought. The oppressive presence of the Central Intelligence Bureau's protectors nearby was a stark reminder that straying from the plan was a death sentence. Even if Axion failed, the Bureau would step in to fix the mess and ensure their operations stayed on track. With a resigned sigh, Orion clenched his fists, bottling up his frustration. Turning to the scattered members of the Scale Dragon Society, who were doing their best to ignore the disaster unfolding before them, Orion snapped, "Listen up. We're not cleaning up Axion's mess. Spread out, lay low, and avoid this chaos." The members exchanged wary looks, silently agreeing to follow orders for the sake of survival. One by one, they disappeared into the shadows, each vowing never to follow Axion into another fight. Orion lingered briefly, watching the battle between Theo and Axion. The scene shifts to a sunlit training ground, where an 8-year-old Axion tightly grips a wooden sword, his small body trembling with a mix of fear and determination. Across from him stands his uncle. "Axion," his uncle barked, "remember your purpose. You're not just a Ragnar, you're a thron. That bloodline runs stronger in you than anything else." Axion glanced up with wide, confused eyes that seemed to ask, "Why me?" "The Ragnar name is just a mask," he declared, his voice heavy with ambition. "Behind it lies the true power of the Thron clan." The scene returned to the present. Grinding his teeth, his crimson eyes burned with anger, frustration, and unresolved childhood pain. He glared at Theo, who stood calm and composed, as if meditating amidst the chaos. "Impressive," Axion growled through gritted teeth, his tone a mix of reluctant respect and seething rage. Without hesitation, Axion charged, his sword gleaming like a terrible decision in motion. His movements were quick, precise, and honed by years of grueling training. "Theo," he yelled, his voice cutting through the tense air, but Theo didn't flinch. He stood his ground, his blade raised in a defensive stance that seemed to mock Axion with a silent "bring it on." His eyes were steady, calm, and calculating, as if he already knew the outcome. Axion's sword came down with all the fury of a man fighting his own insecurities, but Theo met it with ease. The clash of steel rang out, sending shockwaves through the battlefield as sparks flew from their blades, momentarily lighting up their intense expressions. How could Theo, a so-called concubine's child, stand so confidently, matching him blow for blow? Meanwhile, Theo allowed a faint smile to cross his lips, not smug, but worse. The scene shifts again to the shadowy halls of the Central Intelligence Bureau, a fortress of secrets. Within its most secure chamber, Julius, the dramatic chief advisor, paced like a child who just heard juicy gossip. His ceremonial robe swished with every step as he grinned from ear to ear. "Theo Ragnar lives. That boy is far more resilient than we ever gave him credit for." Across the room, Wolfgang stiffened, sweat beaded on his weathered face as his mind struggled to process the implications. "Theo survived," Ed Ragnar muttered in disbelief, his hands trembling slightly, a rare crack in his normally steely composure. "I sent my 3 best scoundrels after him, how could they fail?" Meanwhile, seated in a highback, Ed's expression remained eerily calm. The scheming uncle of Axion, he didn't let his emotions show until the weight of the report sank in. Slowly, with the grace of someone who'd been plotting for years, a smirk stretched across his face. "So, Theo is alive," he murmured, his voice smooth and almost pleased. In his mind, the gears started turning. "Axion will uncover the relic's secrets, and then my swordsman will finish Theo for good." Before he could spiral into another villainous monologue, the room's informer interrupted, their voice trembling. "Sir, there's more." Ed's smirk faltered as his head snapped toward the informer. "What is it?" he demanded sharply. The informer hesitated, clearly aware they were about to ruin Ed's carefully constructed sense of control. "Theo and Axio, they're currently dueling," they stammered. The words landed like a slap. Ed shot to his feet so quickly that his chair nearly toppled. "A duel?" he exclaimed, his calm demeanor shattering. The room fell silent as his mask of composure cracked. Back on the battlefield, Theo moved with a deadly grace, his precise footwork making his movements unpredictable. Axion, for all his anger, matched him move for move. He deflected Theo's first attack, parried the second, and narrowly avoided the third. "He's stronger than I expected," Axion thought, his grip tightening on his sword. But then his crimson eyes gleamed with confidence. "But he's not fast enough." With a sharp motion, Axion hurled his sword, the blade slicing through the air with deadly precision. Theo's eyes widened as the weapon hurtled toward him, and for a brief moment, time seemed to slow. A memory surged to the surface, vivid and burning. The sudden appearance of the thrown sword leaves both of them rattled, their confidence shaken as memories resurface. Theo recalls a haunting moment from his past, a thrown sword, his death, the pain. Axion lands lightly on the snow, the swirling flakes forming a shroud around him. His icy gaze locks onto Theo, sharp and cold like shards of frost. "There's a basic flaw in your strategy," he states, his voice dripping with contempt. He continues, his words cutting like a blade, "Relying on flashy, predictable moves only makes it easier for me to read you." A single drop of blood falls from Axion's blade onto the untouched snow, a grim reminder of the fight's deadly stakes. The pristine white around the fallen soldier quickly turns crimson, the scene stained by violence. Theo's eyes narrow as his gaze shifts to the fallen man. His mind flashes back to the cloaked figure he faced in his final moments before his regression. Axion, standing over the lifeless form, feels a twinge of unease. The man's face, frozen in a silent scream, etches itself into his memory as the puzzle pieces start falling into place. In the memory, a cloaked figure pulls his hood lower, shrouding his face in shadow, an ominous presence against the snow-covered backdrop. Axion's patience thins, his blazing eyes reflecting his rising frustration. "End this," he commands. Theo's fury builds, his face a mix of grief and anger. Memories of the burning palace, screams, and devastating loss flood back. "The monster who caused this," he growls, his voice heavy with venom, "will pay." His memories deepen, taking him back to the Rose Palace, now engulfed in flames. Once magnificent, it is reduced to a crumbling inferno. "The day I died," Theo whispers in the memory, his voice laden with regret. He remembers running through the burning halls, helpless and desperate. "I was supposed to die that day," he thinks bitterly, the weight of his powerlessness crushing him. And Theo recalls Evelyn's relentless investigation. Her efforts uncovered the truth. Randon and the Camellia Palace were intertwined, two faces of the same coin. The attack was orchestrated, the burning palace a cruel reminder of betrayal. Theo clenches his fists as the realization sharpens. Among all the swordsmen, only one would dare to use such a reckless technique, a thrown sword. The truth hits him like lightning. "Axion Ragnar," he whispers, the name bitter in his mouth. Analyzing his opponent's style, Theo concludes, only someone blinded by arrogance would rely on such a gamble. Any lingering doubt vanishes as certainty solidifies in his mind. Theo grips his broken sword tightly, the jagged metal cutting into his hands, but he barely feels the pain. The blade cracks, breaking into two useless shards. As the pieces fall to the ground, he whispers, his voice raw with anguish, "What is it with you people?" Axion's eyes widen in disbelief, his voice shaking as he stammers, "He broke a sword with his bare hands." Theo's bloodied hand tightens as he glares at Axion, his voice steady and resolute. "This isn't like before," he declares. "I won't repeat my mistakes." With smooth precision, Theo picks up a fallen sword from the snowy ground, a weapon left behind by a fallen comrade. With a surge of energy, Theo hurls the broken sword toward Axion. Axion scoffs, unimpressed by the act. "What kind of pathetic attempt was that?" he sneers, his tone dripping with disdain. "A poor imitation of my technique, you're truly a fool." But as Axion's words fade, his eyes narrow, and a flicker of unease appears. Something about Theo's movements feels off, sending a chill down his spine. A shiver runs through him as he senses the power radiating from Theo. This is no ordinary killing intent. "This is something far darker," he whispers, fear creeping into his voice. Theo's mana surges like a tidal wave, a palpable force exploding outward and pressing down on the battlefield. Axion feels as though he's suffocating, the sheer intensity of the energy leaving him breathless. How can his mana be this strong? He wonders, his blood turning cold as realization strikes. Axion is frozen in shock, his mind reeling with unanswered questions, failing to notice Theo's rapid approach. Theo unleashes a devastating wave of energy, a force so overwhelming it tears through the forest, shattering trees and shaking the ground. The air crackles with raw power as Theo raises his glowing blade, its light almost otherworldly. With a fierce cry, he swings the sword down, aiming for Axion's head. Axion, driven by desperation, lifts his own sword just in time to block. Sees an opening and presses his advantage. A cruel smile curls his lips as he taunts, "Is this all the mighty Axion Ragnar has to offer? I'm honestly disappointed." Axian's face contorts in rage, his voice a guttural growl. You'll pay for that. In a sudden move, Axian grabs Theo's arm, catching him off guard. Theo stumbles, his balance momentarily lost. Axian seizes the opportunity, his sword swinging toward Theo's head. Theo barely manages to leap away, narrowly avoiding a fatal blow. As Axian rolls back to his feet, Theo's lightning-fast kick slams into him, forcing him to block with trembling arms. Theo advances, his cold, determined gaze locked on Axian. "Let me show you how it feels," Theo growls, his voice a cold, menacing promise. He pauses, letting his words hang ominously in the air, his glowing blade illuminating his face. "To have a sword driven through your stomach." Theo's strike is swift and merciless. Axian's eyes widen in disbelief as Theo's blade finds its mark, aiming straight for his head with deadly precision. Moving to the Remington in group, surveying the scene, "It doesn't look like a monster attack," a voice remarks while. "It looks more like someone was taken." "The only one capable of such an act is Axian," Remington suggests. Hulkus, Erica, and Remington exchange uneasy glances before Remington adds, "Axian? But he's in first place." Hulkus wonders aloud, does he want to collect more bells? Remington's eyes narrow as he pieces the situation together. "It seems like he's taken Theo's subordinates hostage to lure him out," he says grimly, his voice hardening. "He's planning to eliminate Theo during the second blooming ceremony." Hulkus is furious. "What? He should face him fair and square. What is he even doing?" Erica, ever pragmatic, remarks coolly, "Turns out Axian's a coward." Hulkus, still seething, shouts, "So what?" Erica responds calmly, "This is Ragnar's blooming ceremony. Situations like this are common." Remington falls silent, deep in thought, his expression unreadable. Finally, he speaks, his tone filled with disapproval. "That's why I dislike Ragnar. Even if this is a contest of strength, such actions are unacceptable." Erica cautions him with a piercing gaze. "Your words are dangerous," she warns. "Are you serious about this?" Remington, with newfound determination, declares, "I must save his subordinates." His voice is firm as he adds, "If it were Theo, he would do the same." Hulkus turns to Erica, his voice urgent. "Sister, if you come with us, you'd be a great help." Erica's reply is blunt. "No, I'm not interested." She elaborates coldly, "I followed you because I thought I'd meet Theo Ragnar, but I don't see him. And to be honest, I really hate weak men. I have no desire to save them." Hulkus stares at her, aghast. "Nuna, are you trash?" he blurts out. Erica snaps back. "What did you say, you punk?" Remington steps in to defuse the tension. "Erica," he says knowingly, "I understand why you want to meet Theo." Erica's eyes widen in surprise, caught off guard by his words. Remington continues, his voice calm yet persuasive. "If you help us now, I guarantee it will bring you closer to achieving your goal." A sudden burst of movement breaks the stillness of the snow-covered landscape. Remington, Hulkus, and Erica sprint across the expanse, their mission clear. Glancing back, Remington calls out with determination, "Hold on a little longer, everyone." Suddenly, a sword materializes in their path, its wielder blocking their advance. The owner's intent is clear as they command, "Stop, you can't go any further." In the distance, a group of figures emerges, swords drawn, forming a formidable barrier. Remington's eyes widen in recognition. "Scaled Dragon Society," he mutters. One of the figures steps forward, a smirk playing on his lips. "It's been a while, Wellington," Orion says, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "I can't believe you abandoned us to hang out with some dumbass," he sneers before adding, "and now you're running with those stupid bare-brained muscleheads." Hulkus, enraged, explodes. "What did you say? That we're dumb muscle-headed bears?" Orion feigns innocence. "I didn't say all that," he replies mockingly. Remington's voice cuts through the rising tension. "Move aside, Orion. I don't want to fight an old friend." Orion, unyielding, shakes his head. "I refuse." Remington's gaze hardens, his hand tightening around his sword hilt. "If you won't move," he warns, his voice cold, "then I'll remove you." A sword swings with deadly force, and the clash is immediate. Blood splatters across the pristine snow, stark against the white expanse. Elsewhere, Sybil desperately struggles to untie himself. Nearby lies Axian's broken sword, discarded after Theo deflected it. Grasping it, Sybil thinks, this is the chance the young master gave me. I must cut these ropes. His gaze shifts to the ongoing battle, where a hooded figure clashes with Theo. Sparks fly as swords collide, their echo breaking the snow-laden stillness. Theo, clad in his white uniform, deflects a fierce blow from a dark-haired opponent. Observing the fight, Theo whispers, a tear tracing down his cheek, he's finally stepping forward. The opponent, revealed as Liam Troyven, grimly apologizes. I'm sorry, young Master Axion, he says, his voice heavy with resignation. I will accept my punishment after the blooming ceremony. The duel intensifies as Theo and Liam's swords whirl in a dance of deadly precision. Liam barks an order, escort the young master. In the background, Axion watches the chaos, his expression unreadable. One of his men confirms the order, yes, sir, as the snowy battlefield descends into further chaos, each clash inching closer to an uncertain resolution. Liam dashed through the snow-covered landscape with unmatched speed, his movements a blur against the frozen backdrop. One of his men stepped forward, holding Axion's dropped sword with reverence. We've retrieved your sword, the subordinate announced. Axion silently took the weapon, his grip tightening on the hilt as he stared ahead. His expression was unreadable, though a flicker of seriousness and resolve glinted in his eyes. Liam turned his attention to Theo, swinging his sword with immense force, the blade slicing through the air with lethal precision. Theo met the attack head-on, their swords clashing in an explosion of sparks, the sound reverberating through the quiet forest. Gritting his teeth, Theo managed to deflect the powerful blow, forcing Liam to momentarily lose balance. Seeing his opportunity, Theo readied a counterattack, but Liam recovered quickly. His sword resumed its deadly arc, this time aimed directly at Theo's exposed form. Theo braced himself, his eyes burning with a mixture of determination and defiance, as the fatal strike loomed closer. Liam's face remained a mask of cold calculation. Inside, his thoughts raced. Theo is stronger than I anticipated. He won't fall to Axion or even the senior prosecutors I brought along today. But we're not on the same level. His gaze darkened as he thought, this is my only chance to eliminate him, now that no supervisors are here to intervene. A flicker of regret passed through Liam's mind. It's a waste to kill someone so talented, but sacrifices are necessary for the greater good. With unwavering resolve, he swung his blade with finality. Goodbye, Theo Ragnar, he muttered, his voice cold and absolute just as Liam's sword was about to strike. Theo's eyes flared with a sudden, ominous red glow. The air grew heavy, and an unsettling aura spread throughout the battlefield. The fiery light in Theo's gaze was intense, radiating an overwhelming power. Blood splattered across the pristine snow as Liam staggered backward, clutching his chest in sheer agony. His eyes widened in disbelief as he looked down at the sword that had pierced him. Pain and horror twisted his expression as he gasped. His expression turned from shock to a mixture of anger and dread. Axion, visibly struggling to contain his emotions, stood frozen. Axion's sword pierces through Liam's back, a crimson bloom spilling across the snow. Liam's body stiffens in disbelief, his own blade slipping from his grasp and clattering to the ground. Theo is frozen in shock as Liam's face twists with pain and betrayal. Blood trickles from his mouth, and his wide, disbelieving eyes lock onto Axion. He cannot comprehend this treachery. With a sickening sound, Axion yanks his sword free, spraying blood across the pristine snow, a brutal testament to his cruelty. Liam collapses to his knees, clutching at the wound. Axion's subordinates remain paralyzed, their faces etched with a mix of horror and confusion. One stands speechless, while another cries out in anguish at the sight of their fallen leader. Axion, what on earth are you doing? One of them shouts, voice trembling. Axion's eyes blaze with an intense, almost demonic red glow, his jaw tight as he spits out his justification. You joined the fight because you thought I'd lose. That's an insult to me, an insult to the air. Theo's expression shifts between disbelief and dawning understanding. Axion, you insane bastard. That's your own family. Axion turns to Theo, a cruel smirk curling his lips. Yes, I must admit, Theo Ragnar, you are indeed strong. His words drip with condescension, a mockery of respect. In a flashback, Ed stands before a younger Axion, his face hidden in shadows. His words linger in the air, filled with malice. The weak are worthless. But you, Axion, you were born with talent. A sinister smile curling on his lips. You should crush others beneath you and rise above them. Only then can you claim the throne of Ragnar. Young Axion's eyes shine with an unsettling intensity, his gaze filled with determination. Back in the present, Axion's face is set with pride and arrogance. You must be weaker than me. That's the only logical conclusion, he says, looking down at Theo with disdain. Axion raises his sword, his stance exuding power and ambition. I will be the strongest. I will claim the throne. There's no way I can lose to someone like you, not here. Axion's hand grips the hilt of his sword tightly, his knuckles white with strain. A silent promise of violence fills the air. His voice trails off as he launches a furious attack, his blade a crimson blur against the snowy landscape. Theo, however, stands firm, his determination clear in his narrowed eyes, fully focused on his opponent. As Axion's sword comes down with explosive force, Theo meets it head-on, their blades clashing with a deafening crash. Axion's eyes widen in shock. Where is he? In the chaos, Theo dodges the strike and positions himself to counterattack. With lightning speed, Theo's sword connects, slicing through Axion. Blood sprays into the cold air as Axion staggers, his face a mixture of pain and disbelief. Nearby, Liam's men rush to his side, supporting his weakened form. Senior Liam, are you all right? One of them asks, his voice heavy with concern. Liam coughs, clutching his wound. His face is pale, but his resolve is unshaken. One of the men glares at Axion. Damn it, I know you're reckless, but this is too much. He hesitates, torn between loyalty to Axion and disbelief at his actions. Despite the agony, Liam grits his teeth and gives a desperate command. Don't worry about me, go help Master Axion, kill Theo Ragnar. His eyes burn with a fanatical intensity. Axion spits out a mouthful of blood, his face twisted in pain and fury. Theo doesn't let up, his sword glowing with blue energy as it cuts through the snowy air. Axion's eyes widen in disbelief as he watches Theo's overwhelming power. This is impossible, he mutters, his voice filled with shock. A flashback interrupts the moment. Ed, with a sly smirk, looks directly at Axion and speaks with chilling certainty. When it comes to Ragnar, you should always expect the unexpected. The scene shifts to a close-up of a flickering lantern in a dark room. The flame dances unsteadily, almost going out, only to suddenly flare brighter. Back in the present, his expression hardens with determination. A single bead of sweat slides down his cheek as he stays focused. No, it can't be, Axion growls. Another flashback plays, showing Ed's dismissive expression. Why are you so concerned about that fool? He's worthless and untalented, Ed sneers. In the memory, Axion holds a card in his hand, a smug grin spreading across his face. I'll toy with him a bit and remind him of his place, he says arrogantly. Ed's voice echoes again, his face partially hidden in shadow. His tone is calm but confident. Don't you see? The gap between your skill and Theo's isn't as wide as you think. The scene returns to the battle. Swings his sword, the blade carving through the air and leaving behind a vibrant trail of blue energy, a testament to his strength and resolve. Fury twists Axion's face as Theo's attack barrels toward him. A worthless piece of trash like you can be torn apart with ease. Axion roars, releasing his full power. Energy surges around him like a storm. Behind him, a massive, terrifying spectral entity appears, its jaws stretched wide in a silent scream of dominance. Theo stands his ground, unwavering in the face of the overwhelming power. His voice is steady, filled with conviction. Throne this, throne that. Because of your greed, so many of my men have died. Clenching his fist, Theo gathers energy around his hand. If you refuse to abandon that ambition, then I will shatter it no matter what it takes. Enveloped in a brilliant blue aura, Theo charges forward. With power surging through him, a magnificent blue dragon takes shape behind him, its fiery eyes blazing with righteous fury. Theo unleashes his ultimate attack, his voice echoing with strength. 3 claws of the dragon. Theo's glowing blue eyes burn with focus as the spectral entity behind Axion lets out a silent roar. The blue dragon races forward, its might undeniable. Liam, despite his injuries, stares in shock at the raw power unfolding before him. Subordinates watch in stunned silence, their expressions a mix of awe and fear. From a distance, Remington, Hulkus, and Erica observe the scene, their faces reflecting the magnitude of the forces colliding. Axion's face is strained with pain and effort as he struggles against Theo's devastating attack.
Every ounce of his power is tested, yet Theo's resolve remains unbreakable. Theo and Axion are locked in a fierce battle, their powers colliding and creating a blinding vortex of energy. The force of their clash erupts into a massive explosion, sending shockwaves rippling through the surrounding area. As the dust settles, the air remains thick with energy and debris. Smoke and dust swirl, hiding the figures within. Axion's boots press firmly into the snow-covered ground, a few drops of blood staining the pristine white surface. Slowly, Axion's boots begin to slide backward, leaving a trail of disturbed snow in their wake. The force of the clash throws him off his feet, his body crashing heavily onto the frozen ground. Defeated, Axion lies motionless, his limp form a dark shadow against the pale, snowy landscape. Theo stands over Axion's fallen body, his sword lowered but still emanating power. His silhouette is commanding against the pale sky. Weariness and a grim sense of accomplishment are etched into Theo's expression as he gazes down at his beaten opponent. Liam's face is frozen in disbelief and horror. His eyes remain fixed on Axion's lifeless form, his voice trembling in a barely audible whisper of denial. Master Axion. The cold, sharp edge of Theo's blade hung in the air like a deadly pendulum, its crimson droplets staining the pure white snow below. Axion lay sprawled on the ground, his lifeless eyes fixed on the unyielding sky. A heavy silence blanketed the battlefield, broken only by the labored breaths of the few who remained alive. Liam's subordinates, their faces pale with a mix of shock and fear, stammered, "Young Master Axion." Despite his serious injuries, Liam struggled to his feet, his gaze locked onto Axion's motionless body. "Kill him," he rasped, his voice barely audible. Theo, his once pristine white coat now soaked in blood, stood still among the group. His sword, though lowered, dripped with the evidence of his victory. Even though Theo was exhausted and wounded, he stood his ground. His sharp eyes scanned the remaining members of the Central Intelligence Bureau. "I'm in trouble," he thought grimly, assessing the situation. "It's a gamble from here on out. Even at my best, I couldn't take on 4 senior proctors at once. In my current state, it's impossible. My stamina is drained, and my mana is nearly depleted from that last attack." Gripping his sword tightly, Theo steadied himself, his mind racing. Soon, he thought, a flicker of hope cutting through the exhaustion. He should appear any moment now. As he prepared for what was to come, 2 cloaked figures began advancing toward him, their swords drawn. Figures dressed in dark cloaks moved with astonishing speed, their swords glinting in the dim light. A startled grunt was followed by the sickening sound of a body hitting the ground, breaking the stillness. Before anyone could react, more figures joined the fight, their movements fast and precise. Remington, Hulkus, and Erica emerged from the chaos, their faces set with determination as their blades clashed with the attackers in a storm of steel. This wasn't who Theo had been expecting. "You guys?" Theo shouted, his voice a mixture of surprise and relief. "How did you?" Remington, his silver hair glinting faintly, offered a faint smile. "Isn't it obvious? We couldn't just leave a comrade in trouble, young Master Theo," he replied, his calm voice contrasting with the chaos around him. Theo, momentarily speechless, could only stare at his unexpected allies. Erica, clearly impressed, grinned and said, "Theo, you look even better in person. It's my first time meeting someone as strong as you. I like you already." Hulkus, unable to contain his excitement, chuckled. "Same here. You're amazing." Sybil, his face bruised but his resolve unshaken, stepped forward and joined the fray. "We're here to help you, young Master Theo," he declared with unwavering loyalty. "We couldn't just stand by after all the trouble we caused." Their intervention was a direct violation of the rules. Interfering supervisors were strictly forbidden, but they had chosen to fight alongside Theo regardless. "Supervisors aren't allowed to get involved," Remington shouted, his voice tinged with irony. "You do know that helping a candidate is a serious offense, right?" The question hung in the air as the tide of battle shifted. The remaining agents of the Central Intelligence Bureau, outnumbered and overwhelmed, found themselves pushed onto the defensive. Liam, his face twisted with pain and frustration, watched helplessly as his carefully crafted plans fell apart. "Sir Liam, what should we do?" one of his subordinates stammered, his voice trembling with fear. "Things have gone too far. Should we eliminate everyone here?" The situation had spiraled out of control, leaving Liam and his men cornered. "Please, sir, we need your decision," another subordinate urged urgently. Liam's mind raced, filled with dread.
He realized the full extent of their failure. We didn't uncover anything about Rose Palace's artifacts. We couldn't kill Theo. Even Sir Axion is dead. And now we've been caught red-handed. Defeat loomed over him, but then a dark smile crept across his face. "We'll cover it up," he declared, his eyes glinting with a dangerous resolve. "Sir Liam, we don't have time," one of his men protested. Ignoring the plea, Liam continued, "The best way is simple." He paused, his sinister smile widening. "Kill everyone." His gaze swept over the battlefield littered with bodies. "We'll stage it as an internal conflict. Say there was an outbreak among the examinees, leading to their deaths on sight," he said, his voice chillingly calm. "That's the easiest way to erase all evidence of our involvement." Reaching into his coat, he pulled out several dark orbs. "These are 5th-grade monster summoning stones. They'll create enough chaos to make it look like an accident. Understand?" His men hesitated but quickly nodded under the weight of his commanding glare. "Yes, sir," one of them said, his voice shaky. As Liam prepared to unleash the monsters, his twisted plan began to take shape, threatening to turn the battlefield into a scene of carnage. As Liam prepared to unleash the monsters, a voice suddenly cut through the tense atmosphere. He gasped, choking on a breath as a sharp blow struck him. "What is going on here?" The arrival of the 3 supervisors representing the White Dragon Clan, Plum Blossom Palace, and Daffel Palace brought a sudden halt to the chaos. Their faces reflected concern and suspicion as their sharp eyes scanned the scene of destruction. Supervisors Sefford Garner and Sally Garner from the White Dragon Clan and Daffel Palace, respectively, stepped forward, demanding answers. "What happened here?" Natasha Koppel, the supervisor from Plum Blossom Palace, observed the devastation with a grim expression. The remaining members of the Central Intelligence Bureau were confronted by the other supervisors. "You 3 over there, stop," one of them commanded, their voice firm and unyielding. "Follow us if you want to save yourselves. Otherwise, you'll end up like Liam." A tense standoff unfolded, the air thick with unspoken threats. Amid the turmoil, Theo stood silently, watching the unfolding events. Though he had survived against impossible odds, the cost of victory weighed heavily on him. "Supervisors," Theo said softly, a hint of relief in his voice. "Thank goodness you arrived in time," her expression a mix of concern and admonishment. "That was reckless, Theo," she said firmly. "Why would you risk so much?" Theo met her gaze silently, his eyes conveying what words could not. As the chaos subsided, the snow-covered battlefield, dimly lit by the moonlight, bore witness to the aftermath of the brutal confrontation. Survivors gathered around Theo. Remington, Hulkus, and Erica stood close, their faces showing relief and exhaustion. Sybil and the others from Training Ground Number 4, their eyes filled with tears of gratitude, cried out, "Young Master Theo, you did all this for us. We have no regrets, even if it costs our lives." Theo looked at them, his heart heavy with the burden of their sacrifices. His gaze shifted to Torre, her pale face glowing with unbroken determination. "The strength I aspire to have." "All right," she said aloud, extending her hand toward Theo. "Give me the bell. I'll take first place." Ray's faint smile held a glimmer of hope, a rare light amid the desolate scene. The moonlight bathed the stark, snowy landscape, casting a somber glow over the unfolding drama. Far away, at the Central Intelligence Bureau headquarters, Ed listened to a subordinate's report, his face pale with shock and disbelief. "Axion dead," he murmured, his voice barely audible. The news of Axion's death hit like a hammer. The other council members Wolfgang, OSA, and Julius sat in stunned silence. Years of planning and manipulation had unraveled in a single night. Their carefully constructed schemes were in ruins, everything had come to an end. This concludes the video. Make sure like and subscribe for another part.